I often sit and think of my time growing up outside of New Orleans. Living in a place of such diversity, both human and natural, is bound to create experiences that are unforgettable. These memories range along a sliding scale from euphoric to downright frightening. I could tell you about the time that my neighbors accused me of wearing a mask and peeping in their windows at night. Apparently, their son, my age, about 13 then, swears that someone looks in his window every night. I could tell you about the time that my father got the phone bill that had upwards of $1,000 and phone sex charges on it. Needless to say, as the only son, I was the accused. After a week or so of proclaiming my innocence, my father calls the phone company only to discover that the calls were all made while we were out of town on vacation. That isn't creepy, except that with further investigation, we discovered that someone had broken into our house to do it. This story is about something even creepier, at least to me. Our neighborhood was on the outskirts of a suburb of New Orleans. We were effectively the last bastion of humanity before the 70,000-acre Honey Island swamp. In fact, our house was the last row of houses before the wilderness began. The rear of our house faced into the fringe of shrubbery and brambles that was the doorway to this pristine and largely unexplored wilderness. I spent many days exploring an ever-increasing circle of this jungle. It was amazing to a young boy who fancied himself a soldier and, in fact, grew up to be one. Always at my side was my trusty dog, a golden retriever who was a year older than me. He was my parents' first child. He was very old, but still very spry. He would never let me out of his sight. After about a year or so of exploration, my domain had expanded to about a mile in any direction from my backyard. Due to the terrain, the marshy land, and the sometimes thick undergrowth, even getting that far out sometimes took a hike of a couple hours. Summer was nearing an end, and I decided to push further out. I wanted to wake up early, pack a little lunch, and see how far I could go, so I did. My trusty dog, a bag lunch, and I began one morning right after dawn. By mid-morning, we were breaching into territory that I had not seen. We came upon a shallow, stagnant river, covered in green algae. It took about an hour to find a relatively easy crossing. We waded through the muck and ended up sitting down under a sprawling oak tree, the first patch of dry land that we could find, to dry out and eat some of the snacks I had taken along. We didn't rest long before I looked around to find that I wasn't exactly sure which way I had come from. That bothered me a bit, but more concerning was the fact that the sky was turning black as the not-so-unusual summer thunderstorm was rolling in. The standard noises of the marsh had stopped. There were no more insects humming or chirping, no more frogs croaking, only the sound of the rising wind in the foliage. Nature knew that it was time to find shelter, and I was feeling a bit lost in the swamp. We packed up and pushed on, looking for something familiar to help me get my bearings. Unlike Tennessee, where I now reside, Louisiana is so flat that orienteering in the wilderness is almost impossible. We walked for about another 10 to 15 minutes or so, in some direction that felt like it was generally back towards home, and we came upon a clearing. This clearing was obviously man-made due to the chopped marks on tree stumps, but there was no obvious signs of a wheeled vehicle being here. When I say clearing, I really mean that the underbrush and saplings were cleared. The tree canopy was very much unbroken. This gave the area a somewhat cathedral-type feeling, with only the trunks of massive live oaks standing like pillars. As I made my way around this anomaly, I got a very bad feeling. I start to notice animal bones strewn about. I noticed that the whole place has an odd smell. In the middle of this clearing are 3 crosses made from timber lashed together. The crosses were charred and appeared to have recently been burned. The hair on the back of my neck stood up and I froze in my tracks. The bottom drops out of the sinister clouds overhead. This was the type of pouring rain that can't be described to someone who has never experienced it. It is like a wall of water with raindrops that are so big that they splashed instead of pelt. I'm slowly backing away from the clearing and calling my dog, who had wandered off to chew a bone that was lying about. He doesn't come, but I call him again, yelling loudly to overcome the crescendo of noise that the rain and the foliage are making in unison. As soon as the last syllable leaves my lips, a figure steps out from behind a tree about 100 yards away. The rain makes detail at that distance almost imperceptible. But I swear to you, he was wearing a tall peaked white hood and gown. I could feel the eyes staring into me through the black holes cut in his garment. I felt evil around me. I froze. I didn't know what to do, but as soon as he lunged forward as if he were about to sprint in my direction, my body took over. I ran. I ran with such force that I made it out of the clearing and into the brambles faster than seemed humanly possible. I reached the green algae river, and instead of finding a crossing, I dived in. I ran until I couldn't run. Ran until my body was soaked with sweat and rain. I ran until I realized that I was totally lost and my dog was nowhere nearby. His old legs couldn't have kept up with me this long in a dead sprint. I didn't stop running for what seemed like hours. About dusk the rain stopped, and my run had turned to more of a clumsy stumbling. Call it luck, but right at about that time that the panic of being lost was about to set its icy claws at me, I came upon a 2-lane asphalt road. Surprisingly, I recognized this stretch of road and knew that I was about 2 miles from my house. I made my way back home and breathlessly told my parents what I had experienced. I don't think they believed me, but they were very concerned about why our dog wasn't with me. For several tense days, I canvassed the neighborhood, hoping that he would find me. We called the animal shelters and vets' offices, hoping that if someone picked him up, they would call us. He showed up at our house almost a week after we had parted ways. I ran up to him and hugged him. The old boy collapsed when we got inside. He was dirty and matted with filth. He smelled awful, but there he was, and I was never happier. The strangest thing about it wasn't all of his weight loss, as that would be completely explainable with him having to forage for food in the wilderness. It was that he was missing an eye. That is no metaphor. He was literally missing his left eye. I didn't notice at first because he was so covered in muck, but somehow he had lost an eye. It's a happy ending of sorts. We took him to the vet, who examined him and proclaimed that he probably got it poked out by a branch or stick as he was running through the woods. The vet acted like that sort of injury wasn't terribly unusual. He lived about another year or so, and we put down our companion at the ripe old age of 15. About 20 years after that, I still feel regret for leaving him behind as I ran, and I still get goosebumps picturing that man in the hood and cloak, lunging towards me in the pouring rain deep in the Louisiana woods. This is a story that I'm always aching to get off my chest, and I think this is somewhere to post it under some anonymity. I am new to Reddit, so please let me know if this is the wrong subreddit. Anybody who wants to read more about this can DM me for articles or proof, as this story is not over. To start, I am a teenage female. I had my own apartment for the first time, having recently moved to a new city to study. I quickly made friends with a group of fun, but somewhat troubled teenagers that spent their days loitering at a local coffee shop. One girl I met in particular is who this story is about. I instantly felt a strong sense of caring about her. She is sweet and bubbly, and the moment I met her remains one of my favorite and clearest memories of her. This girl tells me of a man named Mike who is like a father to her. Her words, who wants to adopt her. Let's know, this girl doesn't have an ideal family. Her real father is in jail, and she has very low self-esteem, and he just doesn't give her the care she deserves. I soon met him, and right away I thought he was great, but I was being so naive. He was a scary-looking biker in his 50s, had some cool tattoos, told stories of great experiences and travel, and seemed quite educated. I thought I was so mature and didn't think it was odd that we quickly became good friends, as the girl previously mentioned felt safe with him, and we both cared for her. We would drive around and talk about everything. I even went to him crying, and he made me feel better within a few hours when the boy I was dating cheated on and then dumped me. I felt powerful having a friend like him. His favorite subject was the girl. He had met her a couple of years prior by chance at this coffee shop. She looked exactly like his eldest daughter had at her age. He told me that 2 years prior, his oldest daughter out of 3 had died. The girl had filled the void. I felt for him and understood. A few months pass and the girl is staying with them. She is soon to be the legal adoption age, when she can choose to be adopted by him, and he is getting more and more excited. Alongside her, I am the person who is closest to him. We spend time talking on the phone and visiting. I sleep at his house, hang out with the girl, and am teaching her how to drive. Mike is like a father to me in this new town. He watches out for me. He tells me I am important to him like the girl is. He would do anything for me. Some of the things he does for me include letting me leave a project car in his yard, buying parts for and helping me work on it, and aggressively confronting a boy who took advantage of me, and stuff like that. And sorry for the huge setup, but it needs to be understood that I trust and look up to Mike with everything I have. 6 months after meeting him, this girl turns of age to be adopted. I am now staying in a nearby town, not seeing them as much but still visiting on weekends. I get a call and he is thrilled to tell me that she has asked to be adopted by him, and he wants to have a big party. I am excited and congratulate him. The last time I saw the girl was a few days before this, and just as our first meeting is vivid in my memory, so is our last goodbye. A few days later, I hear she has been reported missing and Mike is gone, ignoring my texts and eventually deleting his social media. Everyone is in a panic. This girl is adored by everyone and is as innocent as they come. This was the start of 2 months of major anxiety and guilt and hurt that Mike had left me. I thought he was there for me. For some reason, I still don't think he would do anything to hurt her. He loved her and protected her. Until a couple weeks later on Facebook, I see a comment on one of the articles. The police are now searching for Mike, wanting to question him although he is not a suspect. A girl has commented, "I am Mike's daughter. Can someone please get me in touch with the family immediately? He is dangerous. I do not believe she is safe if she is with him." What the heck? I message her right away, give her the girl's grandmother's number, and ask her what she means by, "He's dangerous." As we talk, I learn about a few things. He never had 3 daughters, only 2. This girl I am talking to is the oldest. When she was a child, he abused her. And the girl who I care about so much is a spitting image of his real daughter when she was a teenager. They had a falling out 2 years prior, time of his oldest daughter's death. I also learned that the girl certainly had not wanted to be adopted. She had thought this was too much. However, she was being groomed and enjoyed the gifts from someone who would give her whatever she wanted. A father figure while hers was not around. I suddenly am thinking about all the red flags. How could I have been so stupid? He had talked about this time in the army. He had put a man in the hospital shortly before I met him after a bar argument. He spent his days hanging around this coffee shop with teenagers. I have experiences with creepy and dangerous men of all ages. He totally had me fooled. I think of the times he told me he cared about me as he did her. The times he picked me up drunk from parties and drank at my house. I slept at his house. Never once did he say or do anything inappropriate, but he had always been overly protective. The police and news reporters are calling me almost daily, asking me what I know about him, asking for all of these details. I ignore the reporters, fearing they will see me on TV. He is eventually found, questioned, and released. Not a suspect. He disappeared again, and I never spoke with him. 2 months after this lovely girl goes missing, her body is found. It is deemed a homicide. This was 1 year ago. There are no leads and no other info released by police, and I have not heard from Mike. There have been crazy theories since then, but mostly speculation. I don't want to believe he did it, and he has not been arrested or made a suspect, but everyone thinks that he is very likely. He lied about many things. I learned the truth from his real daughter and can't possibly include it all here. I wonder where he is. I wonder if one day I'll be minding my business and he will appear. Something in me still doesn't believe he could hurt me, but something else wonders. Could it have been my body found? But the worst part is the tremendous guilt I feel. I was with him all the time. I spent time with these 2. Why didn't I intervene? I'm so sorry. So, old man, let's not meet again, although I do miss you. Talk about internal conflict. Quick edit. I realize I am not as sneaky as I thought, and an article is now in the comments about my friend. A Google search of her name will show many more. I doubt he will find this post, but if any more reporters contact me, or a problem arises from me posting this, I will have to delete it. But this is my story and it had to be told. I just hope I can keep my privacy. I grew up on a tropical island with a high crime rate. We lived far out with no neighbors, making us ripe for the picking from sketchballs. Police and alarms were a joke. When I was a little girl, we had these two amazing boxers. They were big and brindle. They spent their days chasing wild horses and hunting feral cats in the bush. The older one had a massive head and a deep guttural bark. The younger one was dumb as bricks, but had an underbite that made him look quite the character. They were incredibly sweet dogs, and we adored them, of course. When I was about 11 years old, I was home alone, and I heard an unknown car puttering up the hill. Two men in a small beater truck pulled up in front of the house and just sat there staring at it. I looked out the screen door, and they started calling to me. "Hey miss, you alone? Come out and talk to us." It may have been innocent, but being young and paranoid and having had our house broken into in the past, I was not at my bravest. Suddenly, my boys came barreling out of the bush at full speed. The older dog leapt up on the driver's side and stuck his head in the window and started barking his deep bark. The driver flew over into his passenger's lap. The younger boxer bounded around the car and proceeded to lift his leg and mark every single tire. The two guys just yelled and screamed for me to call off my dogs, and they would leave. I just locked my front door laughing, and eventually the dogs got off the car and chased the men barking down the hill. I missed those dogs still. The older one was already arthritic at the time and didn't live much longer. The younger one decided to try his hand with some wild dogs and didn't make it. We had to put him down after the fight. I never felt as safe without them around. So possibly sketchy men in a truck, but not me without my boxer boys. I have a ton of crazy stories from growing up there. It was a crazy childhood. I'm new to this sub, but I've spent the last few days reading so many of these stories and I'm hooked. I've told this story to friends, but not many. I'll provide a bit of background for everyone. I'm currently 29 female and this took place when I was 14. I had just started 8th grade. I grew up in South Texas, and as I'm sure many of y'all know, fall is still very much a part of hurricane season. It was a Friday night, and it was just me and my mom at home. My dad was out of town for work. I originally had plans to go spend the night at a friend's house, but there was a tropical storm coming, and my mom decided last minute that she would rather have me at home that night. I was upset. Tropical storms weren't normally looked at too seriously. I honestly felt like she was overreacting. Of course, this was my "I'm 14 and therefore so grown up" mentality at work here. My mom did feel bad, and we rented a bunch of movies and ordered a pizza and got a bunch of ice cream for a great night in. My parents' bedroom was on the opposite end of the house from mine. Okay, this is important for later. We lived in a split-level house. The house I grew up in was built in 1950 and was a post-modern style. Think Frank Lloyd Wright. The entire back part of the house was all floor-to-ceiling windows, about 8 to 9 feet tall. Think of just a huge wall of glass. The whole house was an open floor plan, so the kitchen was the first to find a room with walls on the first floor, and my bedroom was directly off of the kitchen, while my parents' room was at the top of the stairs. I apologize if this is difficult to visualize. This was a modern style house and it's difficult to describe. She had gone to bed around 10 p.m., and I went to my room to watch 2 movies that I had rented for just me. The storm was really starting to kick into high gear. The wind was picking up and it was raining sideways. I was in the middle of watching The New Guy. Haha, I know, lol. And I still remember looking at my clock, and it said 12:53 a.m. I think. I was getting tired and could feel my eyes getting heavy. With the weather so bad, I remember thinking that maybe it wasn't so bad I had to miss the sleepover. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember is a huge crash. It was one of the big windows in either the dining room or living room. Our neighborhood was in a really wooded area, and I thought that a tree or branch had fallen in the storm and had broken the window. I left my room and went out through the kitchen. Right as I was approaching the doorway from the kitchen to the dining room, I could see my mom coming down the stairs. I saw a man standing in our dining room covered in broken glass and blood. Due to where he was standing, I couldn't get to my mom. He was young, in his early 20s, and was soaking wet and had no shoes on. He had literally run through our window. He was bleeding all over, had glass sticking out of him, and was standing barefoot in a bunch of broken glass. It took him a second to register both me and my mom, but when he did, he immediately launched into an explanation of how he was being chased by someone who wanted to kill him and we need to call the cops. My still fairly innocent 14-year-old brain didn't doubt this at all, but my mom was eyeing him very suspiciously. We moved into the kitchen and my mom grabs her purse and my arm to keep me close. I had grabbed a kitchen towel to try and help his bleeding. My mom pulls out her cell phone and starts calling our neighborhood patrol. I noticed this, and so on our landline I called 911. We both finished our calls and now we're just waiting. The guy couldn't sit still and kept getting up and looking through our kitchen windows and pacing back and forth. He didn't seem to notice that he was all cut up and bleeding everywhere. He starts muttering under his breath. What happens next really happens fast and becomes a bit blurry. But the doorbell rings. It was our neighborhood patrol that my mom had called. The doorbell had sent the guy into a panic. He jumps up and suddenly he grabs a hold of me. He has me in a chokehold and my mom is now screaming to please let me go. He starts looking around all frantic and pulls me through the dining room and living room toward our stairs. At some point the bell rings again. My mom is following, still begging to let me go. He has me at the stairs and my mom has the choice now to go to the front door to open it or follow him up the stairs. She runs for the door just as he pulls me up the last of the stairs. I hear our alarms start blaring. Normally we arm it at night, so you would need to type in the code before opening a door. He pulls me into my parents' room, but as soon as we get into the room, he drops me and starts to freak out. It was apparently all the lights. He starts smashing lamps, trying to get all the lights off, screaming that they were burning him. There's a small garden of my parents' bedroom, and they have garden lights they turn on at night. He takes a chair and throws it at the glass door, trying to smash it so he can get to those lights. At least that's what it looks like. I had crawled to a corner to get away from him at this point. When he completely turns away from me to grab another chair, I make my run for it. I run down the stairs. The cops had made it into the house at this point and were at the bottom of the stairs with their guns drawn. One of them grabs my arm and pulls me out of the way once I reach the bottom and takes me outside to an ambulance and my mom. The adrenaline is coming down and it hits me that's what happened. And I start shaking and can suddenly feel pain around my throat from where he'd been holding me in a chokehold. There's a lot of yelling and screaming from inside, and then maybe 10 minutes later, the cops come out with the guy in handcuffs. He sees me and tries to lunge at me, which was terrifying. I had a bruised windpipe but was otherwise okay. I learned later that the guy was 20 years old and a chemistry major at one of the universities in town. Together with some friends, also chem students, they had made their own PCP. He had never tried PCP before and had a bad reaction. They had been driving to get some food when he first started acting paranoid and upset, and then at the drive-thru insisted they let him out and took off. Thinking you're being chased is a common hallucination to have when you start having a bad trip on PCP. Light sensitivity is also a common side effect in general for being high on PCP. But he wasn't a bad kid. He had never been in trouble before, was a good student, and was pretty much the last person you would think of that would do something like this. Our house was the only one on our street that wasn't completely fenced off, and that's how he was able to reach the back and those windows. When I got older, it really hit me just how easy it is to become that kid. I had friends who wound up being chemistry majors and also DIY'd some of their own drugs. Thankfully, the night didn't end up worse, because it definitely could have gone in an entirely different direction. So, this happened roughly 2 years ago. I worked at a hotel which had 50 rooms on 3 floors. I was the only employee in the building after about 5 p.m. It should be noted I am a girl. The hotel is on the farther side of the city, but it's considered to be on the nicer side, so a lot of companies will send their workers to us for room and board, instead of the shadier motels on the opposite side of the city. Some of them were great guests. Others completely trashed everything, but that happens everywhere, I suppose. The layout of the building was pretty simple. You pull up to the front entrance, enter the foyer, and the front desk and lobby is right through a set of automatic doors. Right across the hall from the lobby was a staircase leading up to the second floor, and to the left were our elevators to the second and third floors. The first floor only has rooms on one side, to compensate for our pool, workout room, breakfast area and dining room, lobby, and office rooms all being on the opposite side. The upper floors have some rooms on each side, with the third floor having the most rooms. Typically, the third floor, the highest, we kept only for business and long stays. The second floor was reserved for short stays or bigger parties, and the first floor we kept open for elders who have wheelchairs or walkers, or people who come in late at night for a one-night stay. I promise this is relevant to the story. Anyways, it was getting towards the last few hours of my shift. It was slow that night, aside from a few work groups that I had checked in with a few hours earlier. I noticed a raggedy, rusted, and beat-up black pickup truck pulling up into the brightly lit car pit. So I got my paperwork ready for check-in. A guy gets out completely covered in dirt. I figured he just got off of work, as most guys come in covered in dirt or oil. I do specifically remember that he reeked, which isn't too out of the norm either. Entirely, I just chalked it up to him being an oil field or construction worker. I got his credentials. His name was Michael, and scanned it into the computer. He also was reluctant to leave his vehicle info with me, but I explained if he didn't, his vehicle was at risk of being towed by morning. I thought he caved just because he was only going to be there for the night. Michael requested a second floor room close to the lobby staircase so he could have easy access to the front doors for smoking. Not out of the norm either. After taking his payment, I set up his room keys. I explained parking policies and explained how he can get to his room, which was just right up the staircase, and the door was on the opposite wall. He had a few bags with him and he went upstairs. Almost immediately, he comes back down the stairs and accuses me of giving him broken room keys. I had to explain that if he put them next to his phone or anywhere near a magnet, potentially in his wallet, the keys would deactivate. I did offer to take him upstairs and open the room for him to make sure the new set of keys worked, and they did. He walked into his room by himself and shut the door, so with that, I was on my way back down to the lobby. When I got back in the office, something odd caught my eye on the cameras. He hadn't left the building, but his car wasn't in the front anymore. He didn't mention anything about having another person with him. If there was, we are supposed to charge a $10 fee per extra person. The side doors don't open unless you have a room key or are on the inside of the hotel, so I started to watch the cameras to make sure he wasn't trying to sneak people in. About 20 minutes pass and I noticed nothing happening except him coming down the stairs. I smile politely and he goes outside. He stays outside for about 10 minutes, just standing in the carport. I can see it on camera. Now, while I thought that was a little bit weird, I just chalked it up to him taking a smoke. I stopped paying attention after a while and started to file my paperwork that was due before my shift ended. Michael ran back into the hotel, cigarette still in his mouth. I instructed him that he must take his cigarette outside and put it out. I told him prior that we do not allow smoking inside the building. He just threw it on the ground and put it out with his shoe. He turned his attention towards the TV and ended up sitting in the lobby for a very long time. He kept glancing towards the door, which made me feel weird. During this time, the friendly demeanor he had at check-in completely disappeared. He seemed paranoid and agitated now. He would even whisper to himself, and I couldn't hear what. After about 30 minutes of him doing this, I instructed him to go back up to his room because I cannot have people in the lobby when I am working on closing procedures. It was a lie, but the ownership allows us to make up reasons if we are uncomfortable with a guest's presence. Michael asks me to take him up to his room because he is uncomfortable and scared. I explained that I am unable to do that for safety reasons. What I could do was watch him go up the stairs on camera, and he could call down to the office on his room phone when he arrived in his room. I was just trying to be friendly and get him upstairs as quickly as I could. He goes upstairs, but immediately comes back down and informs me that he forgot where his room was and I would need to show him. I told him I couldn't leave the office or lobby, but I could explain to him where his room was because it was very simple. He was continuing his whispers. This time, it was about him losing his phone. I didn't pay any mind to it. After explaining to Michael where his room was, he went back upstairs and I heard the door slam shut. It echoed throughout the second and first floors, and it gave me chills for some reason. Almost immediately, he comes back down and starts yelling at me, telling me I stole his cell phone, that I'm planning his demise, and that I need to find his phone. This was completely bogus, as I haven't left the office since making sure his room key worked. He asked me for help and I just wanted him to go away, so I slipped a screwdriver in my pocket just in case he tried to attack me, and I began rummaging through the lobby couches looking for his phone. I didn't find it, but I did find his credit card, which he also began accusing me of stealing. I stood my ground and said if he can't respect me in my place of work, I can call the police and request they escort him into his room or off of the facility. He got angrier, snatched his card from my hands, and went back outside. After about 20 more minutes, he comes back inside. He is calmer now, but he asks if I would please go outside with him because there is something wrong with his car. After I absolutely refuse, he tells me that I need to go outside, that it's not fair he's the only person out there working on his car, and he just needs some frickin' help. I had to explain that I am not allowed to accompany a guest outside the building. He just starts repeating that I absolutely have to go outside with him. Now, I have anxiety and I tend to let my mind roam over wide horizons, and this was no different. I was about to have a panic attack, so I called the owners and asked them what I should do. It was my first hotel job, and although I have tons of freedom doing my job, I still want to know how to properly handle these situations. The owner told me if I am uncomfortable and suspect he is under the influence or a danger to me, I have full reign to call the police and have them ban him from the property. I asked if they could just keep an eye on the cameras they have access to at home because he is acting weird. I locked all the lobby doors and made sure the side and fire exits were all properly secured and closed, so nobody could sneak in. I did this while doing this on the phone with my boss because I was scared to leave the office by myself. After getting back behind the office, I locked the door and I just braced for him to come back inside. My boss tells me to just watch the cameras and keep my cell phone nearby, just in case I have to call for help. Meanwhile, I noticed on the cameras I couldn't see Michael anymore. I didn't know where he parked, but I damn sure wasn't going to go looking. But what I did notice is there was another vehicle driving through our parking lot. I called the hotel next door to ask if the car was on their cameras too, and I was informed it was an unknown vehicle to their records. It was unknown to me as well. This just shot my anxiety up even higher. The car would drive around the back of the building to the front but avoid the carport. Turn and then do the same to the building next door. The parking lot was almost empty, so I know they weren't looking for a parking spot. The car keeps going and I'm watching it on the camera so focused that I don't notice Michael came back inside, telling Michael he either needs to go up to his room or vacate the premises. He just continues to yell at me, saying I need to go outside with him and he won't move out in front of the entrance. I imagine he was staying within view of whoever else he kept looking back at. Then randomly, I see him sprint across the parking lot and out of the camera view. I also didn't see the car anymore after that. Since it was practically the end of my shift, I somehow managed to get everything done just in time for the next shift to arrive. I was so glad to see her that I almost cried. I explained to her what happened and that the owners want her to keep the lobby doors locked. We put up signs explaining our doors were broken and due to safety reasons, guests would have to call for entry or use the side entrances for their rooms. I also deactivated Michael's room keys and told the next shift girl not to let him back in. If he shows up, call the police because he is a security risk. I made sure she watched me get into my Uber ride after triple checking the vehicle, and driver matched what my phone said. Since I was a regular customer of the driver, he asked why I was so riled up. I asked him to drive through the parking lot with his doors closed so I could see if Michael's truck or the other vehicle I saw driving across the parking lot was anywhere near the buildings, and they weren't. I have no idea what happened to them. The next day, I had my boyfriend come stay the entire evening shift with me, just in case he came back, because I was told by my bosses that he never came to get his stuff. He wouldn't pick up the phone for calls either. Nothing happened that night or any other night, except for a month later. Michael came in asking about his stuff and if he could get a room. I refused his room, and luckily other people were with me in the lobby and in the office. I had our maintenance man go retrieve his items and explained he is no longer allowed on the property. If we saw him, the police would be called and he would be arrested for trespassing. Again, this wasn't true, but we didn't want him coming back at all. I noticed Michael had a different vehicle this time. It was a newer model SUV and it was maroon. It matched neither his beat-up black pickup truck nor the dark colored sedan I saw driving in circles. If there was anything that sat with me even after all of this time, it was that he remembered my name. He addressed me by name when he walked up to the counter, and at first I thought, oh yeah, my name is a part of my uniform, until I realized I forgot to put on my name tag that day. After that, I refused to wear one in the hotel. Management let me create a fake name and wear that from that point on. It took me a while to feel safe in the building again while I was alone. I constantly had my boyfriend with me while I worked the evening shift. So there is a chance the guy and the circling vehicle are unrelated, but my anxiety and the aura I got from Michael that night, it didn't feel good or right. So I still remember this happening so vividly. It was terrifying to the point that I had to move rooms as I was too scared to sleep in my original one. The houses in this suburb were back to back. So basically there was a street, a line of houses, a fence sectioning them off, another line of houses, and then their street. The backyards were what touched each other. So you could basically climb your backyard fence and land in your neighbor's backyard. This is important to understand the layout, so I apologize. My house towards the back of the house was the laundry and then my room with a large glass door leading outside. It had windows on the side which sat on a concreted side passage that connected the front of the house to the backyard. My bed was pushed up against the wall with the window above and next to it. 9-year-old me was a night owl. As a young kid, I used to pretend to go to sleep and wait for the all clear and then turn the lamp on and read my books. This particular night it was windy, so you could hear the dry leaves being blown up and down the side passage. It was around midnight when I heard the leaves shifting and moving around outside a lot quicker than before. Assuming the wind had picked up, I kept reading. The noise was growing louder and louder and it seemed to stop right by my window. The house is an older house and is on stilts, so my window would have been 2 to 3 feet off the ground. I heard a bang against the wall and then a scraping noise. I froze sitting in bed as that noise came from right behind me. I panicked as the scraping was more and more frequent, and I turned the lamp off and did what every child would do in that situation. I retreated under the covers and hid while listening. My heart was pounding. I can still feel the fear to this day. The noise stopped and I heard the crunching on the leaves as whatever it was walking away. I was trying to gather the courage to run to my parents' room, which was at the front of the house, but that meant I had to walk past the glass door. Then I heard a thump up the stairs to the back door. Then the clamoring of wind chimes. They were metal and hung low. Whoever it was could not see it in the dark and must have knocked them as they were peering in the door. I heard them grab it and throw it to the ground. This was followed by tapping and scratching it. They even tried the door handle. I screamed loud, hoping Dad would wake up. I heard the person clamber away. I got up and ran to my parents' room. woke up Dad in a panic, declaring somebody is outside. He took off with a baseball bat and no pants like the knight in shining armor he is. I don't know how long it was, but he came back and told me he could not find anyone and I should go back to bed. I refused and slept in the lounge room that night. It got to a point where I was unsettled. My parents had to shift all the rooms around me to move from the room. It was only years later when I was 20 and we were at a family diner talking about things we did when we were young. I brought up that story. My dad turns to me and says, "Since we don't live there anymore, I guess I can tell you that I did find someone that night. We found our neighbor Bill, who was the father of one of my friends from school. He was trying to climb over the fence when Dad caught him, and the first thing he said to my dad was, 'Oh, did something make her scream?' Dad refused to tell me what happened after that, but that line chills me to this day. He found his ladder on its side near my window in the morning, which of course, he did not tell me about either as the creep was trying to climb into my room." I feel like background history is required here. All of this began when I was 17. I am now 21 and he is now 23. This is how an innocent friendship became deadly, or at least very worrisome. I used to be very involved in a youth group, and one evening we had a lock-in at a sister church, and I met Toby there. Toby was shy, but he talked to me a bit, and we ended up exchanging numbers and becoming really good friends. We met up often at church camp and music events. He made it clear that he wasn't interested in me and pushed me off on his friend Logan. So Logan and I didn't hit it off, but I really liked him, and it was my first real heartbreak. Toby told me to shrug it off, and so eventually I moved on and decided to not see anyone. Fast forward later that year, my junior prom. Toby said that he would be my last minute date since I didn't plan to go originally. We went, and once again he kept pressing that we were just friends. I was fine with that and told him I was glad to have him as a friend. I didn't really start dating until right before my 18th birthday, and when I did, Toby somehow found out. He called me like 24 times and yelled and swore at me, telling me to give him a chance. I got angry and even deleted my Facebook because he blew that up too. The strangest thing was the night of my 18th birthday. He showed up at my house with a birthday cake and 4 of his friends. I was scared. He laid off finally, and it was a random text every now and then after that. I started seeing somebody in a long-distance relationship and made a Twitter about 2 years ago. I still didn't have a Facebook and I had a new number. I had a Twitter for about 2 days before he blew it up, calling me all kind of names, I'm sure you can guess, like whore and stuff. I immediately blocked him and he just created more. About 7 to 10 in total, I believe. He began harassing my SO and threatening to kill him and his family. My SO ended up leaving me and that really broke me. Fast forward 4 months and I'm seeing someone local for about a month, and then Toby begins once again contacting his family and him. Once again, I get left. This continues to happen before finally I just stopped dating. I began hanging out with more friends. I decided to go to the mall one day with 3 of my coworkers from work, 2 of whom were male. We were all having a good time and I guess I let my guard down. I was helping my friend find a shirt when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around and I was face to face with Toby. My heart caught in my throat and my knees shook. He said hi and asked how I was. The whole time he was talking, I was trying to sink into a clothing rack. He finally left the store after my 2 male friends walked up to see where we had gone. I collapsed and began having the worst panic attack of my life. I couldn't breathe. My friend called my mom and they had to call mall security to get me to breathe normally again. After that, it got even worse. He began trying to contact family members of exes, telling them he was going to kill them. His parents blame us and say it's just a phase. How is it just a phase if your 23-year-old child is ripping sheetrock off the walls in anger? His family begged us to not call the police. The moment he did finally get arrested, he spent 6 hours in jail and got bailed out by his mom. The investigators said they had him on film, confessing, but Alabama laws didn't really prohibit cyber stalking. All he's ever gotten is a slap on the wrist, and that makes him believe he is untouchable. He was committed to a psych unit once, and the day he got out, he began harassing the moment he was able to. When the police asked if he got any help at all there, he told them, "All I have to do is what they tell me and they let me go. I know how to play this game. I am now engaged to a wonderful man and I can't wait to marry him. Unfortunately, my stalker is still around. He has only gotten worse since he figured out I am dating again. I may have forgotten to point out that I have him blocked on everything, to every privacy in place. As do my SO, my friends and family. I honestly can't tell you how he finds these things out because I don't go announcing them. That's what scares me the most, is that he's so bent on my destruction that he's gone through every means possible to hunt me down. The latest update I have to give is him telling Twitter he's coming up here Saturday. And I'm scared shitless. This is the first time Toby has threatened to come find me. Please, Redditors, I've dealt with this for 5 years. The law won't help me and I'm afraid for my life. I'm also sorry for the sporadic jumps. I'm a little bit shaky and scared. We'll answer any questions regarding my post to the best of my ability. Update. Sorry I haven't responded. I've been busy with school. So anyways, we had court on the 11th. He got the toughest judge in the county. He was given 2 years with a parole officer. He must report to them every so often. He cannot come near me, my family, or my property, nor can he contact me or my family. He pleaded guilty to all of it. It wasn't so much what I wanted, but it is a start. He knows he can't contact me, so he is after my friends again. If he contacts me, he gets a mandatory 6 months in prison. This is the crap I have to deal with, and I'm sorry for complaining, but it just gets hard. I don't want to keep losing friends and having them threatened. I'm 16 and live with my mom and dad, plus my younger brother who is 14. I greatly enjoy playing guitar and practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I have done with my dad and brother for the past year. It's currently school holidays, so I will most of the time play guitar until the late hours of the night with my headphones on. This story is based on one of those particular nights. The town we live in is peaceful and trustworthy, so we only lock the front door because, well, who would break in? There are 3 trained martial artists living here. The back door to my house is into the laundry, which is sharing a wall with my bedroom, and they are connected by a hallway. It's about 12:15 a.m. and I'm playing guitar. Parents and brother are in bed and I'm doing the usual, watching YouTube guitarists while playing my favorite riffs. This one in particular being the Welcome to the Jungle intro by Guns N' Roses. Things are alright, but I'm thirsty, so I go to the kitchen. The window above the sink overlooks my whole street, which I look out of as I'm drinking a glass of water. It might sound a bit cliche, but I saw this shady looking dude talking on the phone, walking up the street towards my house. I stood in the kitchen as I watched him walk. When he got past where I could see, I moved into the dining room to look out the other side. I saw him walk away, no longer on the phone. I didn't think a whole lot of it, turned the lights off and went back to my room. Fast forward to 10 minutes later, I'm back in my room doing what I was before. This time doing another riff, and just as I finish and my guitar stops making noise, I hear a scratching sound at the back door. It's a windy night, so I just brush it off, as the wind blowing the plants outside into the wall. But then I heard the door open. I guess whoever it was didn't see if it was locked first and tried to unlock it or something. But whatever happened, there was someone I didn't know in the room next to me. I had no idea what to do. Sure, I know my way around a fight when necessary, but I'm 16. What if this guy has a knife? Or if not, what if he's 6 foot 6 inches and weighs 110 kilograms or more? I heard him open the laundry door and enter the hallway. He made his way to my bedroom door and just stood there listening. I had to think fast, so I unplugged my headphones, cranked my amp up to 100 watts, and played the Sweet Child of Mine riff as loudly as I could. I guess he got spooked because he bolted straight out the back door. My angered father storms to my bedroom to ask what the heck is going on, so I explain and show him dirty footprints that prove the intruder's route. Needless to say, I lock the doors from now on. So this is my first time posting here, and this happened a couple of hours ago. I'm still kind of scared to be completely honest. I'm a female in a small town that is considered to be quite safe. I decided to have dinner at McDonald's with my dad. So we get into McDonald's. Everything is great. We order and sit down at a table. We are just talking to each other for a while before a guy sits down across from us. He has no food or anything, just his phone, but he will not stop staring at me. Our food arrives and I stop worrying about the guy and start to eat. A few minutes later, I hear the sound of a photo being taken. That click kind of thing when you take a picture on your phone with the sound on. I quickly turn around and look at the guy who has his phone angled at me and is now meeting my gaze. I turn away, trying to not think about it before I hear another click. I don't dare to look this time. My dad wasn't paying any attention and would tell me I was full of crap if I said anything, so I didn't. We finished up our food and the guy left. So this is a story that happened to my sister a few months back. While on her break from work, she had just gotten into the parking ramp to come back to work. She had just put some new songs in her iPhone from Spotify to listen to while she made her walk back to the building. iPhone in hand and earbuds in, she exited her car to begin walking to the door to the skyway when she noticed a young man walking towards her. As he approached her, she took out one of her earbuds when she realized he was trying to speak to her. I can't remember the exact details my sister shared with me or what he had said first, so my apologies, but I believe the encounter went as follows. He held out his hand to shake and said, "Hi, I'm PJ." My sister, being polite, held out her hand to shake his. "Hi, I'm..." Just as their hands met, he grabbed hers forcefully and pulled her towards him, so she was facing away from him. He then tried to force her onto the ground, between her car and another car parked next to hers. She fought him with everything in her to stay upright and not to be forced to the ground. I believe the struggle lasted at least a minute. As this was happening, a man entered the parking ramp and noticed what was going on. He yelled out, "Hey, what's going on over there?" The man let go of my sister and ran off. Luckily, she wasn't seriously hurt, but if I recall correctly, she did get scraped up a little bit and her iPhone fell out of her hand onto the concrete and the screen broke. There wasn't any serious physical damage, but for a while, and I think even still to this day, she was pretty shaken up about it mentally. Now, while she was recounting this story to me, she said she thought that maybe he was just trying to rob her, as she did have her purse over her shoulder. However, if that was the case, then he could have easily just grabbed the purse and ran off with it. We found out that later that day, he returned to that same parking ramp and had made another attack on a woman. The police report stated that he had forced her into the back seat of her car and assaulted her. I feel awful for the other woman who encountered this man, who I found out actually worked with my mother. But knowing his true intentions that day, I'm relieved that my sister was able to fight back, and if that man hadn't come into the parking ramp at that particular moment and said something, her situation would have most likely turned out much worse. Now, the man that made these attacks was found a couple of days later, lurking around near that parking ramp, and was arrested and convicted. Thankfully, justice has been served. This is a very spotty memory from my childhood, but I remember enough to still be freaked out every time I think about it. I was very young, probably around the age of 5, and my family and I were at the public pool that day. We went quite often when I was younger. I don't remember how this interaction came about, but I remember talking to a woman who looked relatively young, around 25 or 30, asking me what my address was. I'm not sure why I knew my address, but I remember reciting my home address to this random woman at the pool. In my little kid mind, this was a completely normal conversation, so I had no reason to not tell her. Naturally, I returned the question to her. Her response was something silly like 123 Toad Lane. I had no reason at this age, so in my head this was a completely valid address. I don't remember what she said after that, but I remember my parents pulling me away eventually, thankfully, and never thinking anything of it until years later. Thankfully, nothing came of it as far as I know, but it's still so weird knowing that some lady I had never met was asking a child for their address. I have so many questions about it looking back. Why did she want to know my address? Did she plan to do anything with that info? Was it somebody else getting her to ask? While I will probably never get an answer to any of those questions, I'm just glad that my naivety as a child didn't cost me any harm. Edit. Also, it was a public pool, pay to access, so no reason for her to ask for my address. Also, there is no toad lane anywhere near my hometown. Let me just preface this story as to why I was traveling alone. So, one of my best friends, Kayla, and I work seasonally at a hiking lodge in British Columbia for the summer. We are both girls in our early 20s. She lives and goes to school in New Brunswick, and I live and work as a chef in Toronto for the winter. We decided this year, as I bought a car instead of flying back home, we would do an epic Canadian coast-to-coast road trip. Everything was going wonderfully. So wonderfully, in fact, that we ended up staying longer in a few unexpected places, and had to cut our East Coast portion of the trip short. Now, my friend Kayla started her schooling on November 1st, so I dropped her off at home in Moncton, New Brunswick on Halloween and stayed the night at her place, planning to head back to Toronto the next day. After a few glasses of Chardonnay and some laughs, I decided I couldn't come this close to the East Coast and not see the Cabot Trail in Nova Scotia. Something that has been on my bucket list for years. So, knowing I still had a week more of vacation before my winter contract, I hastily booked a hostel for the next day, November 1st, at the Acolyte Hostel on the Cabot Trail. When I booked, only one option came up. I assumed because I waited until the last minute to book. A private dorm with a queen-size bed for $35. I thought, what a bargain, and booked it immediately. I left Kayla's house in Moncton at 7 a.m., knowing it was a long drive. Now, the Cabot Trail is roughly 150 kilometers long, so I thought to be safe, I would plug the hostel address into my Google Maps and head straight there to get my bearings. I would arrive at the hostel at roughly noon. Knowing it was way too early to check in, I figured that I would consult with the front desk and figure out the nearby hiking trails and bring my bags in later. I was about to arrive at my hostel, according to Google, but all around me was nothing but farmland. Google instructed me, the destination is on your left. I saw nothing. About 50 yards up the road, I saw a wire bar bent to look like the letter A, spray painted bright red. I was staying in the Acolyte Hostel, so I guessed that must be the place and followed the dirt road. It led me to what I can only describe as a dilapidated barn. No signage. There were 2 cars parked in front, so I parked alongside and got out of my car to try and figure out where I was. Once I got out, a small-ish man around mid-40s with dark hair and intense eyes popped out of the barn and asked me if I was staying with him tonight. I said yes. He asked why I booked so last minute, and I explained to him my situation, seemingly satisfied with my answer. He insisted on taking me on the grand tour of the barn. The first thing I noticed was that the entirety of the barn had been dug out around its foundation, about 5 feet deep and 3 feet around. He led me across some particle board laid down as a sort of ramp leading inside. The second thing I noticed about the property is that there were no windows. This was clearly a barn meant for livestock. The gentleman leading me on this tour was named Kevin, the owner. He proceeded to tell me his grand plans for the place. It all seemed pretty far-fetched, as it was just a big old barn with particle boards separating most of the rooms. He led me up the skeleton stairs made of plywood and 2x4s to the cabin loft, where I would be sleeping that night along with his family, the mother of his 5-year-old son, his son, and Kevin's own mother, who insisted I call her mom. The upstairs was certainly an open concept. A frail curtain separated the beds to the sides with a large open area in the middle. I asked if I was his only occupant that night and he said yes. I had a feeling he didn't get occupants often. I told him I was interested in the hikes in the area and wanted to get to them before it got dark. He gave me very detailed instructions for his favorite hikes and how to get to them, and off I went. I figured the place wasn't ideal, and I wished the website would have let me know it was still being built. But hey, I did book last minute. Beggars can't be choosers. Plus, he was pretty friendly and helpful with my hiking advice. I hiked the area until it started getting dark. I didn't pack enough food for the day, but I figured I'd head into town for dinner. The nearest town was clearly a booming tourist destination for the summer. But now in the off-season, it was a ghost town. All the hotels and B&Bs in the area were boarded up. Such a ghost town, even the liquor store was closed for the off-season. Finally, I found a dark, empty bar to eat dinner. It was, to phrase lightly, a disappointing supper. I had this romantic image in my head of me sitting on the harbor front, sipping on bubbly, slurping back some ocean-fresh oysters. I was assured by the server and bartender and cook that the fried oysters I ordered were definitely not fresh. I didn't even ask. I figured with all of my options for things to do and being exhausted, I should just head back to the hostel and read my book. I got back around 8 p.m. I could smell that the family that lived there was in the midst of cooking dinner. A little boy ran down the wood steps to greet me. He yelled, as little boys always do. "My name is JP. What's yours?" "Nice to meet you, JP. My name is Alex." He immediately asked if I wanted to come play. I said definitely. Just let me put my bags down in my room first. He followed me through the translucent curtains to my room, so instead of getting settled in, I just headed straight out into the main area. I started throwing a foam ball around with JP. His mother, father, Kevin, and grandmother, Mom, were all just sitting down to eat without even acknowledging we were there, playing in front of them. The mom and dad just start what seems to be a basic argument, which then turns into them yelling at each other. Completely weirded out, I told JP I need to go to my room and call my mom, as she is wondering where I am. Of course, the boy, who doesn't understand proper boundaries yet, follows me through the curtains and sits on my bed. I try taking his attention away from his family fighting, so I start asking him where he goes to school, his favorite color, stuff like that. His mom starts calling for him. He doesn't answer, instead chooses to sit in my lap and hug me. Not wanting to cause any problems, I yell to the mom that he is in my room. She runs in and snatches him off of my lap and yells to the dad. "I know what you're like when you get this angry. I'm taking JP. Don't follow us." I hear her book it down the stairs and he runs after her. I also hear a car start up in the lawn and not just drive, but peel out of that driveway. I heard him cursing. A door slammed, and then the sound of the excavator I had seen outside earlier that day came on. I guess he wanted to do some handiwork to let off some steam. Now just left upstairs our grandma, who still insisted I call her mom, and me. I walk out of my not-so-private curtained room with my bag and say, "Listen, you guys have been great hosts, but I should go." She starts rubbing my arm and telling me to stay, explaining that her daughter-in-law doesn't understand Kevin like she does, and she's the real problem. Now, I'm ready to tell Mom screw off her at this point, and just leave it until I realize that she still had a knife in her hand from cooking dinner. It's only a 4-inch knife, but with intent, I'm sure it could really do some damage. I don't think she meant it as a threat. I think she was just a kooky old bird who didn't understand. Maybe don't hold a knife while trying to console a stranger. So I go along with what she is saying while she rubs my arm with one hand and flails the knife around in the other. I inch closer and closer downstairs toward the door. She keeps rubbing my arm and shoulders with her free hand, telling me to stay and that her grandson is special. And before I even booked the night, he had a premonition I would be staying with them. As soon as I get out the door, I run towards my car. I start my engine and back up in the lot to get out of there. Kevin in the excavator blocks the path, with about a 5-foot ditch on one side of the drive and forest behind me. He gets out, says he's sorry, and tells me I should stay, that he'll make it up to me. Grandma comes out with a knife still in hand, saying it's Kevin's fault I'm leaving. They bicker for 5 full minutes until I yell, "If they don't let me leave, I'm calling the police." All of a sudden, they get super defensive, like I'm the one being unreasonable. So I turn off my engine and start to dial. Kevin gets back in his excavator and starts backing up. As soon as he's far enough, I can see an opening to drive across the grass. I turn my engine back on and rip out the drive. I'm sure doing a number on the suspension of my little sedan. As soon as the property is out of sight, I go to call my friend Kayla. No service. I remembered back to earlier in the afternoon when I first got to the hostel. I was going to check my messages and saw the no service sign. Even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have been able to call the police. I drove the 6 hours straight to Moncton, New Brunswick, and stayed with Kayla. A little backstory. I was about 16 at the time and I rode the public bus to and from school. This particular day, I had done some special effects makeup before the end of my classes, so I had fake blood running down my face and I couldn't be bothered to take it off before leaving school. Now, I knew as I was boarding my bus, people would stare or ask questions, so I wasn't surprised when this man, who looked to be in his mid-30s, started asking about the makeup. The conversation was normal at first. Just the usual. "Oh wow, did you do that yourself?" kind of stuff. I answered the questions as I normally would and expected the conversation to be done and over with. Boy, was I wrong. This man, whose name he mentioned was Joe, started steering the conversation into strange territory, asking me if I had a boyfriend, to which I lied and said I did. He then proceeded to ask if my boyfriend liked the makeup and if I was on my way to see him now. I again lied and said he likes the makeup, and yes, I was going to see him, trying to get Joe to believe somebody was expecting me. The conversation died down for a bit until he said this. "You know, you remind me a lot of my sister," he said with a smile. I just smiled in response, not really knowing what to say. After not hearing anything from me, Joe continued. "My sister was kind of a jerk. She was always lying about me to our parents. I had fantasies about breaking her jaw." Now, at this point, I was terrified. My bus stop was still another 20 minutes away, and I just wanted to be out of that situation. Seeing that what he said made me uncomfortable, he switched the subject, telling me about where he worked and what he does there. I just nodded along to what he was saying, remaining silent the entire time. Closer to my bus stop, he says to me, "Why don't you come to my house? I have a freezer full of pizza and ice cream. Maybe we can hang out for a while." To which I politely declined, saying my boyfriend was expecting me. Finally, I get to my bus stop and quickly get off the bus, speed walking all the way home, all the while calling a friend to inform them of what happened. Things were fine for a bit after that. I switched my bus route so I wouldn't run into him again. But one afternoon, I had to go to a store that was on my old route. I was nervous about getting on that bus again, but was happy when I didn't see Joe. I did my shopping, and as I was leaving the store, I saw Joe, standing out by the doors, staring at me. The second I was out of the doors, he walked over to me, a grin on his face, and wrapped his arms around me. I pulled away from him, telling him I was very busy and had to go. He then asked, "Well, what are you doing?" "I have time. I can tag along." I was very persistent, saying I really could and I had to go, and I walked away, heading into a neighboring store that I knew would be busy. Sure enough, Joe followed. I ignored him as I made my way down a heavily populated makeup aisle, keeping my attention on some cheap lipsticks in the hopes he'd get the hint and leave me alone. But I was wrong. Joe reached over my shoulder, grabbing a red lipstick as he leaned in close and whispered, "This color would look gorgeous on you. Can't wait to see you wearing it." He then placed the lipstick in my basket and walked away, leaving the store. I remained in the store for about 20 minutes after he left, afraid to leave and make the walk home. After I mustered up the courage, I put the lipstick back, put away the basket, and called a friend to stay on the line with me until I made it home. Now, I don't know if he followed me home or not, but I can say that after that day, the motion detector porch light started coming on at night, and I started hearing knocks at my bedroom window. Thankfully, I moved shortly after and haven't seen Joe since. I had blocked this story from my memory until my girlfriend reminded me of it a couple of days ago. I started dating my girlfriend at the end of my senior year, and before we started dating, I used multiple dating apps. In many of my dating app profiles, I had my Snapchat listed so that people could add me. This is important. Nothing led to anything with dating apps. I would talk to people for a bit and eventually the conversation would die out. When I began dating my girlfriend, I had deleted the apps, but never deleted my account, meaning people could still see my profile and my Snapchat in it. I realized this after a few people would add me, but it didn't go anywhere because I would tell them I had a girlfriend. As you would imagine, the conversation would end there, but there was this one time a dude that added me, let's call him Adam, and he asked me if I was available. Being straight, I was used to dudes adding me, so I gave him the usual response. Sorry, I'm straight and I have a girlfriend. I expected him to leave me alone, but he didn't. At first, the messages were normal. How was your day? What did you do today? Simple stuff like that. Being the nice dude that I am, I responded because I thought this guy just wanted to be friends. Having a gay friend is okay with me. Then the message progressively got creepier. He started asking questions about my girlfriend and not the basic ones. Like, do you guys have sex a lot? Or just other really creepy questions. I simply responded with, those are kind of personal questions and I don't feel like it's right for me to share my dating business. Adam would always apologize and not talk to me for a few days. Then he would hit me up again and ask creepy questions again. I eventually told my girlfriend about the situation, and for those who don't know, my girlfriend is super sweet, but she is also very aggressively protective over me. She adds this guy and basically tells him that he needs to leave me alone. Unfortunately, this enraged Adam, who responded by saying that I need to dump this jerk because she's a cunt. Naturally, I defend my girlfriend and block Adam. Everything was cool for a week until another account added me. The guy's name was Tyler and he was super chill. He was super nice to me and respected my relationship with my girlfriend. As the days go by, I start to notice that Tyler's vocabulary is very similar to Adam's. I wasn't sure about it, so I didn't make any assumptions that it was him. So I gave Tyler's snap to my girlfriend, who adds him to investigate. As soon as she adds Tyler's snap, Tyler flips out on her, which confirmed that it was Adam. As soon as this realization is made, I block him again. From here, everything goes quiet from Adam for about a month. So I live in the suburbs of Chicago, and both my girlfriend and I live down the street from each other. So naturally, we do see each other a lot, and both of our families are really good friends. On top of that, our families would also house sit or pet sit for each other. Anyways, a month goes by until I get a letter with no address or name on it, just my name on the front. I open it, and to my shock and horror, it is basically a love letter from Adam. The premise of the letter was basically him saying that he loves me and wants me to run off with him. The letter also takes a very creepy sexual turn halfway through. At this moment, two horrifying realizations hit me. One is that he knows my address, and two, he dropped that letter off himself, meaning that he is in my town. I immediately call my girlfriend, who is equally as shocked as I am, and after consulting with my parents, we call the police. Unfortunately, since I had blocked as well as removed Adam's social media information, and the letter had no return address, there was nothing we could do about it. Day after day, letters would keep appearing in my mailbox until they also started appearing in my girlfriend's mailbox as well. Her letters were far worse than mine. Adam wrote how much he hated her and how much he wanted to hurt her. He also spoke many times of the ways he would inflict pain on her until she broke up with him. Like me, she took this to the police, and again, they could do nothing about it. My girlfriend's family had plans to go to Hawaii for vacation, and I was to house sit for them. The first couple of days went fine, until the last night of the week. As per usual, I was over at their house watching TV on the couch when the power went out. Mind you, it was around 1 a.m. and it was pitch black when the lights went out. The next few seconds were silent when I heard a window smash from the office. To understand this more, let me give you the layout of the house. When you entered the front door, to your left was the living room, straight ahead were both the kitchen and stairs, and to the right were the office and dining room. On the upstairs level, as soon as you reached the top of the stairs, a bathroom was straight ahead and my girlfriend's room was on the right and the other bedrooms were on the left. Immediately I shot up, grabbed a kitchen knife, and ran upstairs to hide while I called the police. I quickly got into my girlfriend's room and slipped into the closet. As soon as I was able to contact the operator, I heard the pounding of the intruder running up the steps. Thankfully, I had relayed all the info to the operator in time, who then stayed on the phone as we both remained quiet. The intruder took a left when he reached the top of the stairs, which gave more time for the police to arrive, and for me to get ready just in case I needed to defend myself. A few minutes go by until I hear the intruder start walking towards my girlfriend's room. In the only few precious seconds I had, I slipped out of the closet and positioned myself next to the door. As soon as he opened the door and started to enter her room, I took the kitchen knife and drove it into his shoulder. The young man screamed in pain as I heard a heavy metallic object make a large thud as it hit the ground. From there I bolted out of the house, where I was met by 4 squad cars and cops with their guns raised. I threw my hands up, shouting that he was upstairs in the room. A few minutes go by, and the intruder is dragged out, still screaming in pain. With the siren lights flooding the street, I got a glimpse of his face. It was Adam, and I was informed later by an officer that metallic thud was made by him dropping his handgun. Adam was from Texas, and he had traveled up to my state to be with me. He had rented a room at a local motel and would put letters in both my girlfriend's and my mailbox daily. He would do this in the early hours of the morning, which was confirmed by the security footage of the motel he was staying at. That night, Adam had plans to kill my girlfriend and her family, so he thought I would choose to be with him. He managed to pry open the power box and switched off the power to her house, along with neighboring houses, and broke in with the intent of her being there. Well, unfortunately for him, she was enjoying a tropical vacation. To be honest, I have no idea how this outcome would be different if they had not gone on vacation, and I am grateful that I still have my girlfriend as well as her family alive. So Adam, please stay the heck away from my girlfriend and me. So this happened at my old elementary school, which is pretty much right behind our house. Anyways, I was walking to go and get my brother, who's 11, to come back home, and as I approached the park, he was nowhere in sight. I start to get a little bit frantic because he's a smart kid and knows danger when he sees it, but is so friendly that he'll jump at any offer to go and play video games. So at the time, I'm thinking that he may have a close friend that he is with, and so I call my mom and let her know. She said that since a year ago, nobody we knew lived in our neighborhood, and we started freaking out. As I began to look around and ask people if they saw him, one kid knew who I was and told me that he was walking with a few older teenagers to a house a few blocks down. So naturally, I'm sprinting to go and see where he went. He's a gullible kid, and I am thinking of the worst. I end up finding the house he's at, and it's an absolute shithole. There were some teenagers in the vicinity of the house, and I asked what they were doing, and one told me they delivered a package to somebody, and that somebody was the owner of this nasty house. I freaked out. I ran and drop-kicked the door so damn hard. I broke the door off of the hinges, and I ran inside to save my brother. Luckily, he was playing video games as this weirdo was watching him. This man was a fat, sloppy, greasy-looking dude, the type of guy that runs a butcher shop. I immediately start yelling at my brother to get up and leave. I am a big guy, 6'1" and 250 pounds. Former college fullback. And as soon as I finished yelling at my brother, I get this guy by the neck and lift him against the wall. Michael Myers type of way. Anyways, I get the guy to spill the beans and find out the situation and what happened. My brother told me that these 3 teenagers came up and said that they knew who I was and invited my brother over to play video games. This man paid these kids to find a little boy to bring to his house so he could fondle them and do who knows what. Possibly kidnap or worse. I've never been so angry or scared at the same time in my life. I called the cops and they arrested the man on charges of abduction, and he is now in jail. This happened 3 days ago, and I don't know how I could live with myself if my brother were killed right before Christmas time, especially. Please watch over your siblings whenever you can, and stress to them the fact that you don't ever do anything without parental permission. That man is so lucky he didn't die, but I have too much of a future to murder a miserable, sick man like that. Edit. The kids were punished by law. 2 have been in and out of juvie. They told my brother they knew me personally and that I said it was okay, and that's what really angered me. They all except for 1 are in juvie. In the processes of the law, right now. The other one's parents have him on lockdown, so I guess that's good enough. couple of years back, I lived for about a year and a half in Moscow. I mostly madly loved that city. I was studying Russian, and naturally I fell in with a group of my fellow English-Russian students and expats. It didn't do my liver any favors since we went out and sampled the chaotic nightlife at least once a week, often more often. I'm not a massive party animal, and I can't stomach going home in the wee hours of the morning all the time, so often I'd catch the last train home rather than go to clubs and stay out till 5. A few quick facts for those not familiar with Moscow. 1. There are very strange people in that city sometimes. Man, I really love that place, but there are some proper oddballs. 2. The last metro train runs at about 1:30 a.m., I think. Unless you catch that, you've either got to try your luck with taxis or walk or wait until the morning trains and get in with the commuters. I'm a cheapskate, and getting the metro was always easier and cheaper. 3. Moscow Metro is legendarily complicated and weirdly organized and intimidating. It's also very kind of creepy at 1 a.m. when, for a bustling metropolis outside the city center, there aren't many people hanging around in the station. Those big, grand Stalinist halls, totally devoid of anyone else. Bloody freaky. Like the setting of some weird dystopian futuristic zombie thing or something. Always gave me the heebie-jeebies. I should also add that for some strange reason, the men there seemed to think I was a member of the sex industry often. This was mainly a problem in the winter months because maybe the women don't risk the minus temperatures at 2 a.m. Just kidding. Maybe just because, I don't know, I spent most of the time dressed like Scott of the Antarctic and trying not to faceplant on black ice. None of which screams prostitute to most people, but... So onto the weirdo. I'd been out to the bars with my friends, and since I had planned a big sightseeing day the next day, I bailed on going to the clubs and headed home. I had a few friends who lived on the same line, but this night they were all going on a proper night out, so I thought, screw it, and braved a boring metro ride home alone. Going home started happily, merrily, drunkenly hopped onto a train, and it was quiet, but not too quiet. A couple of merrymakers out and about, but I got a seat with loads of space in a relatively quiet car, and I kind of zoned out for a few moments. Our antagonist got on at the next stop. He was a very big man, heavy set, but also generally huge, and he stood near the doors. I don't know why I just kind of ended up spacing out in his direction. I was drunk, alright, but I did end up staring a little bit, not paying attention, just waiting for my stop. Gradually, though, I noticed he had this pool of pinkish, reddish, watery stuff collecting in drips around his feet. Like, you know, the stuff you get in a packet of meat. My brain processed this as blood at first, so I stared like an idiot, wondering if this man was injured or something. When I looked up, I made embarrassing eye contact and realized 2 things. The liquid was leaking from his shitty, battered-looking backpack he was carrying. Seriously, who carries leaking meat in a backpack? And he was also staring at me. I looked away. He came to sit in the opposite seat from me, still staring. I only had to wait one stop for the station I had to change lines at, but it was the most damn uncomfortable wait I've had for a long time. He stared at me the whole time with something my brain can't decide was a weird rape or assault face or a want to hurt you face, since I was too scared to properly look at him. My station came. I got off the train. Meat Man followed, which I shrugged off. Maybe he lives at this stop, I said to myself. To be sure he wasn't following me because he made me massively uncomfortable, I took a very counterintuitive and convoluted path to the platform I needed to catch the last train from, even at the risk of missing it. Fortunately, this station was quite busy and full of guards for some reason, or I might have freaked out a bit here and then. I genuinely took the most stupid time-consuming trip of the platform I could think of. I looked over my shoulder a lot. I kid you not, he followed me every step of the way, step after leaking step. I tried everything to shake this man. When my train arrived, I got into one car, dived off, and ran into another, running like a lunatic to avoid missing it. He somehow followed me. I pretended to not get off at the next stop, the station before my station. He started to follow but didn't buy it. All I could think of is, wow, I'm going to be killed by the Russian equivalent of the midnight meat train man. This can't be happening. I purposely avoided even looking at him. I didn't want to miss my stop, so I jumped off the train like a crazy person. Again, luck was not on my side because that jerk must have the reflexes of a cat. My station was one of the ones that was genuinely really quiet, like a freaking tomb, and it creeped me out the best of times. To make it worse, the easiest way home was through one of those convoluted Moscow metro overpasses. I decided to do the stupid thing and ignore this man, just go about my business and hope he went away. Halfway through the underpass, this man was still following me with his drippy bag and his crazed, unfocused eyes and his weird rape murder face. And Dutch courage kicked in. I was pretty spooked out by this man, but I was also really upset and angry. Suddenly, like really mad. What I did next was stupid, but it is a lighthearted end to the story of the scary Moscow Metro Man. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. It probably won't work most of the time. I wouldn't try it on anyone or anything else. For example, bears. Yeah, so please don't try this on bears. I was also really drunk, which is probably why I thought screw it and decided to do it. Aware that this man was still following me and closing in and genuinely being very stalky now, I turned around and shouted, "If you don't leave me alone, I will murder you." And other things to that extent in a drunken mix of Russian and English. I kind of had a very special kind of alcohol and fear-fueled temper tantrum, which involved jumping and feeling like a crazy person, swearing and throwing my shoes at it. You know, out crazy the crazy. Eventually, I managed to get him to piss off enough to make a getaway, and put enough distance between us that I managed to lose him. Worth looking like an idiot for, I reckon. I don't know why he was following me or what was in that damn bag. That leaking stuff, or why he looked so mad. He might have been drunk, maybe, and I know my imagination takes me down a dark route when I think about it. Maybe I was lucky to not be found face down in a ditch or something. Maybe he had truly horrible plans and I made it too much hassle to be worth the payoff. Maybe there was something properly nasty in that minky looking backpack. I'll never know and I don't want to. On the other hand, he was scared off by a drunken woman waving her arms like a helicopter, shouting threats and throwing her shoes around, so maybe he was just, I don't know, mildly creepy and not much of a threat at all. Again, I'll never know. But that's the story of the Moscow Meat Man. Hope it wasn't too long. I'd like to share with you a series of horrific events from my childhood that we never had a real resolution to. There were some suspects, but nobody was ever brought to justice. Also, there has been a lot of terrible things happen on my mom's property, and that's another story, but here's part of the beginning. This part of the story happened roughly around 1990 during my summer break from school, but continued on for quite some time. I must have been about 2nd or 3rd grade age, and I grew up with just my mom, because my dad was never in the picture, so we lived alone until I was about 12, when she remarried. Our secluded country neighborhood was safe for the most part, and all of our immediate neighbors were elderly, save for one couple who had a few young adult sons around my brother's age. For the most part, though, there wasn't much riffraff in the area. At first, there were only minor clues to indicate something was going on, such as things being moved in the backyard, and I guess because my mother was always being paranoid, and definitely a conspiracy theorist, she always had an idea that something was happening. I didn't really know this until I heard her talking about it much later after the events. She tried to hide things so they wouldn't scare me. She even started sleeping in my room with me at night, probably because she was paranoid, but I assumed it was because we could stay up late and watch movies together and eat snacks. One morning after I got up, I noticed that our old wooden back door had huge chunks missing out of it around the part where the lock/bolt goes into the door frame. It was as if somebody were trying to chip away at the locked part. I showed Mom what I had discovered, not realizing why the door was damaged, and she went completely silent, pale-faced and panicked. I could tell something was wrong, but I was too young to understand that somebody had apparently tried to break in, either in the night or when we were out. That day, she mended the door to the best of her ability, and if I remember correctly, she even put a new lock on it from the hardware store. She also filed a police report, but there was nothing they could do. I had a German Shepherd named Munchie. He was a big, spoiled baby who loved raiding the fridge with me, but to a stranger, he was probably very intimidating. He was also my best friend and very watchful over me, and I miss him to this day. For a week or two, after Mom and I would go to bed, Munchie would start pacing and whining and acting very anxious. Since we lived in such a rural place with no imminent danger, we thought Mom would frequently let him outside by himself, so one night when he was acting exceptionally strange, she let him outside alone. We didn't have central air because our house was old, built in the 50s. We were very poor and Kentucky summers weren't really too hot anyways. At night, Mom would open all the windows in the house, with the halfway burglar latch, of course. Since she was in my room with me watching a movie, we had both my bedroom windows all the way open. My back window overlooked a bit of a hill, which gradually sloped into a low, wide bottom. The bottom was full of tall weeds and bushes. Suddenly, we heard movement in the brush of the bottom. Munchie. Then we heard him snarling like a werewolf. Mom got up and ran to the window but couldn't see anything. What we heard next was horrifying. It sounded as if Munchie was attacking someone. He was making those awful noises as if he were eating somebody alive. I began to cry, terrified that something would happen to my best friend, and my mom started screaming in horror for Munchie to come home. We heard what sounded like somebody escaping my dog's wrath and taking off through the brush. Mom ran to the back door with me right behind her and called for Munchie at the top of her lungs, until he came running back into the house. He was panting and grunting and bristled up. I hugged him so tight, I probably nearly squeezed the life out of him. As time progressed, things got worse. Being so young, I didn't know for a long time, but my mom was safeguarding the house. She even moved a full tall dresser in front of my window that overlooked the hill in the bottom. She tried her best, but whoever was harassing us was finding new ways to make our life miserable, or maybe try to kill us. One night, she said that she heard peculiar noises coming from the backyard. I don't necessarily remember this, so I called her for details before writing this. Sounds were coming from under the dining room windows, which overlooked the backyard. She turned on the security light on the back of the house and saw a ladder propped up against the back of our house, as if somebody were trying to climb through our windows. This incident seemed more like an empty threat than a real attempt, especially considering the back door was probably easier access. We don't know if the person thought the windows would be unlocked or what, but for whatever reason, they gave it a try. Again, she called our local police and they did nothing. I should probably note that we didn't really have much law enforcement there. You probably wouldn't believe me if I tried to tell you how worthless law enforcement was, and still is in that area. On another occasion, and this memory is burned into my brain because it scared me so bad, somebody snuck up to my bedroom window one night. I hate to even think what their intentions might have been. Mom had drifted off to sleep, but I was quietly watching the rest of Willy Wonka. I was looking in the direction of my ominous window, the one overlooking the bottom, so I ended up getting a good look at this big white hand which reached up and slapped my window screen multiple times, in rapid succession. I screamed. Mom woke up and the tormentor took off, no doubt through the brushy bottom. My mom is a dog person. She adores dogs and always had lots of dogs and puppies around. We had 7 little black pups and the mother dog around this time, and they lived outside on our huge property, had plenty of space to play, and had a very nice big doghouse. At some point around the same time this stuff was happening, we had to be out of town for a few days. Mom had some people watching the house, and I guess she didn't really think anything horrendous could happen. Then again, she wasn't aware of how far this would go. When we came home, Mom's puppies had been killed and lined up in a row in the side yard, close to my window that overlooked the bottom. This was obviously absolutely devastating. The police did little to help, which included telling her how short to saw off her shotgun so that I was still legal and advising us to keep Munchie in the house. I forgot to ask, but I'm nearly positive that my mom ended up sending the mommy dog away to my sister's house on the other side of town. Months later, incidents were increasing in occurrence, and then somebody decided to take it way too far. Something hitting the back of the house in the wee hours of the morning. Mom looked out the windows and saw nothing, at least not until the next morning. She found a stick with a charred pine knot on it. Somebody had apparently lit it on fire and threw it at our house. I assumed they were hoping our house would burn. And don't even ask about the cops because they did nothing yet again. I wouldn't be surprised if they knew who the culprit was and just didn't care. Then one day, Munchie went missing. He had gone out to the bathroom in the evening before bed, but he didn't come back immediately like always. He vanished. I don't even want to go into detail about this because it breaks my heart all over again, but we found him days later. He had been poisoned. To be completely honest, I could keep going with this story. Although it takes a lot of unbelievable turns, not all of them are horrifying. Some are just ridiculous. Then around 2009, a multiple year-long court case began where my mom had to fight a group of her neighbors in court to keep them from stealing her property. Those events led to us believing that the people involved with that case may have had something to do with the torment we experienced all those years ago, but really all we can do is assume. So, tormentor, I wish we could meet, but You are a coward who harasses women and children and hurts animals. My cousin lived with me and my husband for about 3 or 4 months while she was looking for a new place, as she and her boyfriend recently split up. Tina was very helpful, and there would be a number of times that I'd come home from work and see that she's already making dinner for all of us, has cleaned the kitchen, or has ironed. She started seeing this guy called Mark, and I personally didn't like him and thought she could do better, but my husband convinced me into giving him a chance. Tina would text us and ask if it's okay if Mark could come over and stay, or if Mark could come to dinner, and I had to fight back the urge to say no, but I said our house is now her house, so she is welcome anytime. Each time I met him, I knew something wasn't right with him, and I couldn't put my finger on it, but I always had some creepy vibe. He always seemed to stare too much or would try and come up with weird topics to talk about over dinner. While I'm eating, I'd rather not talk about how much bleach it would take to kill someone. As I said, very weird things. Small items started going missing, and it was small things. Like some buttons came off my husband's jacket, so I got some new ones that matched the others the best I could and placed them on the side. I came home and they were nowhere to be seen, and the household said they didn't pick them up. My husband even joked around that the borrowers have it again. On payday, I decided to go and get some new clothes from a shop here, as I didn't want to spend that much. I usually grab some funny underwear, by the way. And by funny, I mean underwear with Family Guy or the Cookie Monster on them, and try and find some matching bras to go with it. I grabbed what I wanted, and putting everything away, I started dinner. A few weeks went by and I was just getting changed, and I opened my drawer and my Cookie Monster bra was there. I suddenly remembered that I have matching underwear, and I'm laughing to myself, wondering what my husband will say when he finds out that I've got Cookie Monster underwear. I honestly couldn't find my stuff anywhere. I tipped my drawer out and went through it all, and I couldn't find them still. I obviously did buy them, as I had the bras proof. I even looked in the bag in case I somehow left them in there. Feeling a bit let down and confused, I got dressed and carried on with my day. Fast forward a few more weeks, and my husband had my car for the day, as he had a meeting a few hours away. I walked to work, and I was on my way walking back from work when I heard a beep and a car pull up. Looking inside, I see Mark. "Hey, need a ride?" Yes please. Thank you very much." I get in the car and casually throw my work bag in the back seat and just turn around to say thank you again to Mark. And I said thankfully he showed up, as I didn't think I could handle walking back to work. Trying to make a joke of the situation. He drops me off at my house and I pull the seat forward and grab my bag while he gets out, as my cousin is at home. I'm grabbing my bag and some deodorant has fallen out, and some cookies I was saving in my bag are now in the footwell. I reach my bag under and wait to grab my things when I grab a small plastic bag. Looking inside, I see my Cookie Monster underwear, the missing buttons, a photo of me and my husband, and a used toothbrush of mine that I had to replace, and even a small collection of my false nails I was wearing once. I ended up pulling them all off as I couldn't find the missing ones to replace the ones that had fallen off. Mark, why is my stuff in your car?" Right as I said that, I stepped slowly backwards from the car and reached for my phone to call my husband. Mark straight away jumps in his car, and we haven't seen him since. I told my cousin about it, and she said that he always used to go to the toilet for ages, and they joked all of the time about him having a water infection or that he didn't like her cooking. I walked into the bathroom at my community college, and there was another guy in there, and he was at one of the 2 urinals. I walk in and step up to the other urinal, and from the moment I walked in to the moment I unzipped my pants, this guy was staring directly at me. In my head I thought, maybe this guy's on the spectrum or something, because our college has a lot of students that are special needs and is a great place for them to get a degree and has really good programs to work with them. So it felt off, but I thought maybe it's nothing. I only wished that this was where the interaction ended. He finished before me and went over to wash his hands. I was just waiting for him to finish up and leave the bathroom because it felt really weird. While I'm still at the urinal and this guy is washing his hands, he looks at me and says, "You're a complete stranger, so you won't judge me. Is it wrong of me to take out my anger on people I don't know?" My first thought was, this guy isn't right, but I should probably listen. But I answered and said, No, that's not right. That isn't healthy for you or the other person. He answers. That's the conclusion I've come to as well. Thanks. And then he turns and walks out of the bathroom without even drying his hands. I don't know about that guy. I have a bad feeling about him and I don't know what to do about this situation. So, bathroom guy, I hope you get the help you need, but let's never meet again. Edit. From all the replies, it seems most people are just as confused as I was. Some say this guy could have been dangerous or unstable. That was kind of the vibe I initially had. Some say that this could have been a question that somebody with a mental illness would ask, not aware of social norms and with no ill intent. That could very well have been it too. Personally, I hope it was the latter, and I hope I don't see him on the news for doing something horrible one day. This encounter was not too long ago and solidified in my mind why I will always close the blinds at night and why even in a quiet suburban neighborhood, you should always lock your door. I've been reading creepy stories online since I was probably 12, when I first discovered Tumblr and Reddit, creepypasta, no sleep, and of course, let's not meet. So, I have long since taken to checking to all windows and locks before I go to bed, and closing blinds and curtains for fear that I might look out to see some creep in a clown costume with a knife in my garden, or a person with their head at an unnatural angle. I always sort of wished I had a creepy encounter so I could write about it, but if I never have another experience like this for the rest of my life, it will be too soon. So, context. This nice suburban neighborhood, as I say, is the home of my parents. A little town in Cheshire, England, a quiet street where we all knew each other. Low crime rate except for one house, which has been broken into and robbed twice in about 10 years. Both opportunistic. Once because the keys were near the door and the invader smashed a small pane to reach them and let themselves in. The other time, they left their blinds open overnight, leaving their laptops, wallets, and both car keys on full display. Anyways, I don't live with my parents anymore, but I was back in town and staying with them for a few days over summer. I was sitting in the kitchen, which faces onto the street, and working on my laptop, just glancing up occasionally to watch people pass by walking dogs or strolling with the pram. I'd seen something moving in my periphery, so, like every time, I looked up hoping to see a dog walker or one neighbor and her newborn grandson. Nope, two people. A man in a semi-casual suit and a woman in plain jeans and a blouse. But they were moving weirdly. The woman had her head craned over to one of her shoulders and her arm on that side was bent backwards and unnaturally upwards with her hand rhythmically flicking. Her other arm randomly but smoothly glided about, guided by her elbow. It was a bit like when you try and push two magnets together at the same point of polarity. That's how I would describe it. I have friends with epilepsy and I have never seen them contort or flick like that. Not even their myoclonic jerks. The man looked more like one of those dancing inflatables you see at a used car dealership. That's the only way I could describe his movements. They walked past my parents' house and I instinctively called to my cat to check he wasn't outside with the weirdos. Found him upstairs in my old room. He was looking out the window, and as I followed his gaze, I saw two of the kid neighbors in that house that had been robbed multiple times waving across to me. Well, to my cat, but I waved back. All the same, from their parents' upstairs bedroom window. I went downstairs to tell my parents about the strange moving people, and my dad just furrowed his brow, asked if they were gone, and said to double check that the door was locked. I headed back to the kitchen to check if our back door was locked. This door doesn't have any windows in it, so you can understand I jumped out of my skin when, as I put my hand on the door handle, it was pushed down by somebody on the other side. I pushed the door immediately, before anybody could push it from outside. I also must scream because I hear my dad call back. I hear his footsteps coming through the house and then I hear a loud gasp on the other side of the door and out of the kitchen window. Guess who I see making a threat? Creepy moving dude and dudette. By the time my dad made it through the house, they're gone. He doesn't seem to believe me, although he also doesn't seem to doubt either. He's never seen them before and takes a free pop at me for being discriminatory against potential house guests with movement disorders. We make jokes like this because I had a movement disorder as a kid, and one time a parent wouldn't let me into her son's birthday party because they would be playing Simon Says and I made it difficult for the other kids. I digress. Anyways, these people were gone. I don't sleep well, due to that movement disorder actually. And those scary stories I read meant that I always listened to the excessive creaking in this house and noises on the street outdoors at night. like people walking home drunk and foxes mating. Most of the sounds are quiet though, so imagine my shock when my straining ears are suddenly attacked by a child's scream. It takes me a second to locate the sound and another to lurch from my bed to the window, looking straight over to the upstairs window, the same one where not 12 hours ago my neighbor's children were waving to me from. I scanned down the house and saw their front door wide open. I shouted for my parents, hoping to wake them up as I flew down the stairs in my PJs, with 999 already dialed on my phone to report this likely home invasion before I do anything else. I'm remembering to scream fire, not burglar, as I stride across the road, attempting to wake up other neighbors and gather support. There are 2 kids and a teenager in that commonly broken into house, kids who I babysat for 10 years, and one of them just screamed at 2 a.m. when their front door was wide open. I make sure I say this out loud to the emergency responder on the phone. As I near the door, I can see a figure inside moving frantically. So after telling the phone responder what is happening and answering their brief questions, I shout into the door from a safe distance, some phrases the police gave me to say. The police are on their way. We are right outside and we're getting help. Is anybody hurt? And to tell the intruders, we know you are there. Please do not hurt anyone. The police can help you. I get a response from the upstairs window and step back into the road to see a mother holding all 3 kids in her arms, and she tells me the middle child, who's 9, found intruders on the stairs when she went to get a drink in the night. The girl, Imogen, tells me they're like clowns. Clowns. This extra detail is the straw that broke the camel's back, and my vision darkens. Shit, I'm going to pass out. The last thing I hear is Emmy telling her mom I said a bad word. I came to in the middle of the road with a foil blanket on and a soft Octonauts toy under my head. I could see lots of blue lights, 3 police cars and an ambulance. That's one for me, and I can see my neighbors out of the corner of my eye. My hearing returns as Emmy tells me her little brother volunteered his toy because I hit my head when I fainted. Suddenly, I'm up and looking around to count all 5 of the family members and checking for injury. Over the top of their heads, I can see an arm frantically waving in and out of view. Yep, moving weirdos broke into my neighbor's house. I see the woman is standing still, her head still slumped to the side, just as she's been lowered into a police car. I was later told that as I spoke to my neighbors out their bedroom window, their dad had gone to fight the intruders and kicked the woman down the stairs as she was climbing them. The man was the frantically moving shadow I had seen from the doorway. Police reckon that they had been trying doors down our street and found one unlocked. I told them about the couple trying our door earlier in the afternoon. I'm guided to the ambulance and sit on the bed while the paramedics tend to a large cut on the back of my head from my fall. I vaguely feel them removing gravel, cleaning, gluing, and dressing it, but I'm preoccupied watching 2 police try to contain the human dancing inflatable man. They can't catch both arms at the same time to cuff him, so eventually, one policeman is cuffed to one of the man's hands and thus has his arm flung every which way as the man continues to move. I have no idea what they've been tried with, if they were on drugs or had a movement disorder. My dad and I do have a small bet on this matter, or when the court hearing is yet, but as a key witness, I'll be told when they need me in court. But I would happily go the rest of my life without hearing a kid scream at 2 a.m. and seeing those 2 weird moving creeps. So, creepy dancing dude and dudette, that's not me. When I was in grade school, my family lived in a house that sat directly across from the school I attended. However, there was about a half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because it was so straightforward. My mom informed me that she and her siblings walked through the woods to school when they were younger, so it felt like a natural and safe thing for her. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school all on my own, and I felt pretty at home in the woods, as I had been raised around them. The walk was pretty direct, with very few issues aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem. It was the fact that on each side there was a steep bank that had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. It had rained the day before, so my steps, which were normally loud, were fairly silent. This might have saved my life. It at least saved me from something terrible. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project that we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for my part in it. I was doing the supernova section and wasn't feeling very ready to make a speech in front of everyone, explaining it. Anyways, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slightly wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of to pull myself up with. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I could climb up the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I heard it again, and I did. I heard a couple of boys talking, getting closer to me. I smashed myself up against the bank and listened for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me to stay away, that something was wrong. The boys came so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash. As luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I listened as the boys talked. Yeah, she comes through here all the time. Should be coming around in just a minute. My heart sank. I was the only person that walked this trail to and from school, and they were in my direct path. That isn't to say that no one else was ever in the woods, but in all the time that I used this trail, I had never seen another person. To get to the woods from my house, I had to cross the road and walk through a small flat area with no trees, and from the school side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anybody from either side could have seen me going in or out of the woods easily. I stood plastered to the wall of mud, waiting for them to catch me, but they walked around a little bit, smoked a few cigarettes, and started getting frustrated. Where the heck is she, man? Said she would be here, so where is she? Maybe she didn't go to school today. Anyways, we gotta go or we're gonna miss our bus. The high schoolers caught their bus to the high school to elementary school. This told me two things. One, they were obviously in high school, so much older than me. And two, they had some seriously bad intentions toward me. I heard them leaving, but I didn't dare move. I waited a good 30 minutes or so before I darted out of the creek bed and toward home. I'll never know exactly what those boys had planned to do to me that day, and I'm not sure I want to. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't want to jump into it. In February, I met a guy at the bar that we frequent. The second time I met him, we exchanged numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable and invited him to a party at my house. He stayed after the party, and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy, and it made me uncomfortable. So I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again, that is, until he started to text me from random numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post on any social media that I was fishing. "I hope the movie was good," when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask where in the bar I was at different bars, when I had never told anyone or posted where we were going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration. We bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 a.m., we came out of the last bar we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it. He does. He goes, "I hope such and such were fun. I wanted to say hi earlier, but since you haven't been replying to my messages, I didn't want to freak you out." Yeah, safe to say I was terrified now. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out and threatened to call the police. I changed my number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since, so to the guy I mistakenly had my first ever one-night stand with, let's never meet again. Update. After all the comments saying that I should still contact the police, that he could still be stalking me, I decided that it was best to do that. I contacted my local police, and they advised me to contact the police where I lived previously. I did so, and I still live close enough that I went on Tuesday to file the paperwork for a restraining order. Thankfully, I know his full name and place of employment, so they will be able to locate him. I provided all the text messages and screenshots that I have, and now we wait for him to be served. It will be a temporary 15-day restraining order. It will be extended because our local courthouse docket is on a stacked schedule due to the virus, so once we've been given a court date, we will go. I was told by the sheriff that it shouldn't be an issue getting a judge to approve a restraining order for 2 years, with all the evidence that I have and the testimony from my friends who witnessed these events. Thank you for the advice. This happened to me a few years ago while I was still in college, but I've been watching a ton of those narrated true stories on YouTube, and I felt compelled to share my own experience. For some context, I'm Irish and I was studying in the UK to get my bachelor's degree. I don't know how common this is elsewhere, but where I lived, it seemed to be more common enough that landlords renting to students privately would convert the front downstairs room into an extra bedroom. This is where my bedroom was for my first year. I didn't mind it too much, but it was a bit weird having the front door directly in my room. Especially since, for those who aren't familiar with terraced houses in the UK, there isn't a front garden usually, and we just had a small section separating the front door from the path outside. By now, I'd been living here for a few months, and I could recognize the difference in the sound of somebody walking past on the path and the sound of someone stepping towards the front door. On the night that this happened, I was totally alone in the house, as both my housemates were away from home for the weekend. This was a little bit unusual since neither of them usually went home except for special occasions, but I think it might have been Valentine's Day around that time or something similar. It was around 1 in the morning and I was lying in bed and on the phone with my boyfriend at the time as we were long distance. As we were talking, I could hear some footsteps outside and I immediately recognized that it was somebody right outside the door. I kept listening and I could hear them shuffling around a bit, and then they started fumbling with the door handle. That spooked me and I told my boyfriend that I was going to have a look out the window to see if I could spot whoever it was. I got up and part the curtains and quite literally pressed my face and hands against the window to get a look outside, since it was pitch black by now and the street lights had been turned off. It took a second then for me to realize what I was looking at, but whoever it was who was outside was doing the same exact thing I was, pressed up against the window and staring in at me inches away. I didn't scream. I just felt as if all the wind had been knocked out of me, as I remember feeling like somebody had just dunked me into a pool of ice water. Whoever it was looked to be male. Couldn't see his face properly, but I just remember he was wearing a hoodie. He ran when he saw me, and after trying to collect myself, I quickly told my boyfriend and then rang the police. I don't remember how long it took for them to get there, but there wasn't a whole lot they could do. I think they might have done a quick patrol of the area, but nothing ever came of it. It was absolutely one of the most terrifying things that's happened to me, and I can't figure out at all why he was trying to break in. At the time I had my light on, which would have been visible from the window even with the curtains drawn, so I figured I could rule out that he was a junkie or squatter looking for a place to crash. I don't know if maybe he'd been watching me and my housemates for a while, but seeing 3 girls living alone and thought maybe this would make an easy burglary, or worse. But I am thankful I didn't have any trouble again afterwards. I couldn't sleep for days after, and I remember staying up until early morning, just watching movies on my laptop to feel less alone until I eventually fell asleep from exhaustion, once it started to get light outside. Since I was here from Ireland, I didn't even have any family members close by who I could call for or go and stay with, and it was the most agonizingly long weekend of my life waiting for my housemates to come back. I definitely think I've developed a slight phobia now of looking out the window while it's still dark outside. Now, before you bite my head off, yes, I know I have posted this story before. My reason for reposting is that the story has since been archived, and I have sort of a massive update to it that I really wanted to add. This morning, I was going through a really old hard drive and discovered a folder. The folder was named Kearney. In it was proof to validate parts of the story. So then people can hopefully stop accusing me of having made it up. I apologize for the awful quality of the pictures because these were taken back in 2007 with my video camera stills feature. So, hi everyone. Lately, I've had some requests to finally share the whole story of the homeless man I accidentally took in as a tenant and the incidents that followed. I'm just saying in advance, this is kind of a long one, but every detail is relevant. And please note, although everything I have documented is factual, the case was never solved and has likely gone cold since this happened more than 10 years ago. Now, back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now closed pub in my hometown. Not a job I particularly liked, but it did pay the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we simply knew as Kearney. He was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all liked him for that. New in town, Kearney had yet to find a place of permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenant, so somebody suggested that he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having had a streak of bad luck with tenants my own age, I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night. But only he wasn't alone. Enter Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I hadn't even realized he was gay to that point, but it was water off my back regardless. Looking back now, what really should have bothered me, though, was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street. Rather appropriately, as I would later find out. So Kearney moved in, and Lawrence was there a lot too. And it was easy to know when, due to his mobile ringtone sounding like the quacking of a duckling. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to this story. In particular, one, he basically never closed his bedroom door. No matter what he was doing in there, it was always open. And two, although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given leave of absence from my bartending job and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently, I didn't mind giving it to her. Sorry, sis. So the day my sister was scheduled to come pick me up, no, I couldn't drive yet. I took a casual stroll into the bar that Ben, my good friend from high school and at the time coworker, and I had been building into my house, and something caught my eye. All of our liquor bottles were completely empty. Now, those who had been frequenting my house at that time would know that we weren't just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy here and there, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, all kinds of stuff. Basically, it was a fully stocked bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in and asked him what he knew about this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge. Those were the actual words that he used, and it left me both furious about the thousands of worth of stock they had drunk out, but also slightly impressed that he was actually still alive. Regardless, I said that I would be dealing with this upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on Friday I get a call from my local police department asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I will probably know him as Kearney and that I should probably come down to the station, as they had just arrested his boyfriend trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back home, where all of my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It's on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime and now has a rap sheet longer than the length of a chapter book. The kicker was that both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail and my sister drops me off at home, more or less the same time that Kearney gets home as well. Based on Kearney's account of what happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself, so he couldn't allow Lawrence to do to me what he was trying to do, I guess. Although I had appreciated his sacrifice, I still told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all of this. However, not wanting to leave the homeless man, while homeless, I gave him until the end of the month to make other arrangements. So Monday comes, and having just completed a staff meeting, I walk home to encounter a very much free Lawrence, sitting on the sidewalk across from my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. Rather out of character, really. I dismiss him without giving him a cent. Now, I go back to the previous night. See, I had mentioned the staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting where we had gotten a rather sizable list of liquor bottles that had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later I opened the garage bin in my kitchen to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it, just in case I needed it as evidence later. I had also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room to search for further evidence. Nothing of vast significance in there, with one exception: 2 single photographs of Lawrence. Before he had turned into a homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still there, but as Lawrence had spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now, I should also add that I had mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney and had told him that if I even suspected that they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself to draw glasses half full of wine. and half full of Coke, which he would go drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he correctly pointed out, he was still a manager and we had no right to tell him what he could or could not do. On his fourth trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing the half Coke / half wine concoctions with Kearney. This made me mad, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with my photographic evidence, which I handed over to the general manager, who was also kind of a friend of mine. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard the confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one who had turned him in. So we had closed early that night and I was walking home, going past the high school. I saw Kearney coming from the opposite direction. He walked past me, literally only saying 2 words. "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time that I would ever physically lay my eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week before Kearney's eviction was to take place. Ben had come to stay with me for that duration, as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing else happened. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room and his door was closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben nor I had caught so much as a glimpse of him in that entire last week, which we hadn't thought much of at that time. So, the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben has gone home for a few hours and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Somebody walks out of the room, opens the front door and leaves. Followed him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. What was left though was his house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took a look at the keys, noticing something strange. Although the correct keys were all in the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember thinking as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state it was in. The two had broken his bed in an act of wild monkey sex, but I had known about that already. As I said, he never closed his damn door, but more that he had literally left almost all of his belongings behind with one exception. You guessed it. The 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever being there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff left behind. There was one thing Lawrence left behind though, his duckling ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone as an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom, and we named him Neville, by the way. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments, both of us thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing had been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that all of this became a conspiracy theory. Did you ever actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized that neither of us had. Suddenly putting puzzle pieces together. The changing habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was to great discomfort that we both asked the question, who had really been living in our house this last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission, searching the town, crawling into drain pipes, trying to find any trace of Kearney's whereabouts, but they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence though. No, he was still around, having made some new homeless friends. We encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just acted like he had never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him and they had arrived rather quickly, arresting him on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted after him one last time, "Where is Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me and let the cops drag him away. The next day, I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person and suggesting that Lawrence may know something about it, but nothing ever came of it. So, Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, let's not meet again. Hey Reddit, I'm a long-time user, but due to the nature of this situation, I decided to use a throwaway. Trigger warning for baby death, abuse, stalking, etc. Also, apologies if this isn't the right sub, we just need answers. My girlfriend's mother is a long-time heroin user and has been in and out of jail for my girlfriend's whole life. When she lived with her mother and her mother's husband, she witnessed physical abuse and drug activity. She was forced to move out at a very young age in order to stay alive. She thought her mother was finally clean when her mom announced her pregnancy. After getting over the initial shock, my girlfriend then decided to be supportive of her mom since she thought she was clean. That was until her mom overdosed while pregnant. She decided to cut all contact at that point. My girlfriend is also a mandated reporter and last year reported her mom and her mom's husband to the state since she knew it wasn't a safe situation for the baby. The baby died in their house not even a month after due to an overdose with signs of physical abuse. My girlfriend's mother was arrested for the murder of her baby and other charges. Her husband was arrested for child endangerment and other charges very recently. At first, the judge did not grant either of them bail. Eventually, her husband was granted bail, which he posted. We did not know this until recently, which helped us put some of the pieces together. My girlfriend and I like to sit outside of her house in the car and just chat or listen to music. Recently, there have been black cars around my girlfriend's house. She is also frequently being followed by black cars when she drives me home. It's the same couple of black cars that do this. They're not just random ones. At first, we thought we were just paranoid since everybody was still in jail, but when we found out that the husband was out of jail, we began to doubt our insanity. The first major thing happened after my girlfriend and I went on a dinner date. Got home after dark and sat in her car for about 45 minutes before we noticed the same black car passing by us every few minutes. After 10 minutes of that, a different car drove towards us, flicking its high beams on when it got close enough for us to see who was inside. It swerved into the oncoming lane, and I genuinely thought I was going to hit the passenger side of the car. It sped away, and we ran inside. After that, we started noticing the black cars more and more. This past Wednesday morning, around 3 a.m.-ish, the same distinct black van that we had been seeing pulled up outside my house. This was weird because my girlfriend and I live about 30 minutes from each other in two separate cities. A man got out of the van and shined a flashlight through my yard, scanning it almost entirely. He shined the flashlight up at the window I was sitting at, kept it there for a second, then walked 30 feet to an empty driveway, scanning around there for 20 seconds before getting in the van and peeling away. The windows were ice covered and frozen, so I couldn't make out the specifics of the van, but it was strange. A few nights later, my girlfriend and I spent some time hanging out in the car when we spotted a black van hiding behind another parked car further up the street. We could only see one headlight, but it creeped by us as we sat in the car. My girlfriend lives between two dead-end streets. Think of a very blocky U, and she lives in the middle of that. The van went up the first dead end, four-way on, and sat for a few minutes before turning around and driving almost into another lane of traffic to get close to us. It then went up the other dead end and stayed put. We thought it was weird that the van didn't just back out of the first dead end, instead opting to drive all the way up the narrow street and turn around. After a few minutes, we call a friend and recount this story just to get an extra opinion. While my girlfriend was talking to her friend, I got out of the car to go for a cigarette and to see how far away the van was. I walked up the dead end that the van was on for about 15 feet before getting the worst gut feeling I've ever gotten. Across the street from me was a black mass, which was darker than the darkness around it. I decided to just turn around and rush my girlfriend into the house. Later that night, we heard a bang coming from downstairs, followed by what sounded like a boot on wooden stairs. We locked the bedroom door, and I sat against the door with a baseball bat, hoping to barricade it. A few minutes later, we heard a car door slam before the sound of tires squeezing and a car driving away. Our initial idea was maybe it came from the TV, but we had paused it, and the TV in the next room is never loud enough to feel real. When I went downstairs an hour later to get water, there was nothing damaged or missing. We theorized that maybe it was the sound of the front door trying to be opened, even though it was dead bolted. My girlfriend's exterior wall doesn't face the road, and we've never heard car sounds before. It is, however, next to a private driveway, and sometimes we'll hear her grandparents' car door close, or the neighbors backing out. The next day, I was shoveling the sidewalks at my girlfriend's house, an activity that took about 20 minutes, and I saw the same black Chevy Silverado with mud streaks on the tailgate. It circled the block about 4 times. I was able to see the silhouette of the man driving through the passenger side window, and each time it was the same man and same truck. My girlfriend lives in a small town, and we were able to catalog the neighborhood cars. The black van and truck are abnormal. Our theory is that somebody is trying to scare my girlfriend into not testifying, or flat out making sure neither of us have the ability to testify. We really just need some more opinions. Are we just paranoid, or is this something we should actually be worried about? Do you think these are just weird coincidences? Sorry this is rather short, but here is my ordeal from the weekend. On Saturday, I got a call from a few friends about going to the mall. It was a stressful week at work, so I thought some retail therapy would definitely help. We shot for the typical lady stuff like makeup, lingerie, and shoes before we decided on hitting the food hall for a spot of lunch. I gave the girls my order and told them I would come and find them, as I needed to use the restroom. The restrooms were at the end of a large and wide corridor, and they were your typical mall with lots of stalls. Anyways, so I sat down to, and I could see from the gap on the floor between the wall of the stall and the floor lots of movement from someone's shadow. I wasn't sure if they were getting changed or not, so I didn't pay much attention at first, but it felt like the shadow was coming from above at some points. As if the light above were being obstructed by something. After maybe the third time, I decided to look up and I could see a phone and parts of a guy's arm leaning over. Somebody was taking photos of me. I instantly shouted out, "What the heck, you pervert?" And in a moment of sheer shock and disbelief, this all very quickly turned to fear as I got up and leapt out of the stall and was greeted by an empty bathroom. Not one person in sight, and from the quick glance of mirrors opposite, there was only one stall shut that was next to mine. I ran for the restroom exit, but it was locked. Luckily, it had a twist lock that I could turn, and as I did, I heard a stall open from behind me. I got out immediately and turned as I exited and noticed a sign on the door saying, "Closed for maintenance." This sign was not here when I went in. I screamed some more, shouting to get anyone's attention as I ran down the corridor towards the food hall, and it obviously caught the attention of a few people. A group of 3 guys stopped me, and they clearly could see the panic in my eyes. They quizzed me. I explained. 2 ran towards the ladies' room, and 1 ran to find security. Security arrived within seconds, and after a while, a rather large crowd had gathered due to the commotion, and although I was in the comfort of my friends, security and now the police, I never felt more alone. Security and the police found nobody. There were a few staff only and fire exit doors down the corridor, so plenty of escape routes for whoever this guy was to go through. I gave my statement down at the station later that day once my parents showed up. The police said they had security tapes from the CCTV cameras that point down the corridor and will keep us updated with any news. Hopefully they find this guy. For some context, I had a really shitty childhood. It was terrible as I don't remember anything from birth all the way to 13 years of age. Everything I know about what happened through all those years was a mixture of sparse memories, things my family has told me about myself, and even police reports. One of those things I do remember, however, is this lady I called Auntie. No first name, no last name, nothing else contributing to her identity. She was just Auntie. I started seeing her when I was 7 years old, sitting in her living room as she typed everything I said down on her laptop. I had no problem with her. I saw her once every month, and she seemed gentle enough that I really thought that she was somebody I could trust, so I did. 7 years later, 14 years old, I admitted to her that I was struggling big time. It was a mixture of multiple different factors. My mom's increasing toxicity, the lack of social interaction at the time, and, more importantly, I never moved on from the horrors in my childhood. Now, I was 14 years old at the time, and I was able to wonder why these meetings with Auntie never actually seemed to help me, especially to do with the fact that I begged her to tell me why I constantly felt upset. I remember on the way to Auntie's house, I asked my mother if I would ever get the chance to see a different person, maybe get a different sort of help that Auntie clearly couldn't give. I was just hissed at to be quiet. Around that time, the relationship between me and my mother began to crack. My mother became a source of grief to me, and I cried about it during multiple sessions with my auntie. Auntie, at the end of these sessions, would try to defend my mother or make me seem like I'm blowing things out of proportion. I tried to come up with my own reasons at the time for why she was not trying to understand things wholly, and I chalked it up to her being empathetic, maybe being able to explain why my mom was terrible, was supposed to help me embrace it in some weird way. And then more things like that seemed to happen. I admit that when I was 16 years old, I was a terrible kid. I went to parties, drank whatever was served, and definitely did not tell anyone what I was doing. But then Auntie started to ask very specific questions, especially to the topics mentioned above. I was in shock. Again, I gave her the benefit of the doubt and thought that her sudden pinpointing of these things must be from the fact that at this point, she's known me for almost a decade. All the way into a year later, she started to bring up the parties I've gone to in these sessions without even bothering to hide behind questions. The relationship between me and my mother had almost been completely severed, and the worst part of all, something that still affects me to this day, was at the end of each session, Auntie had started to invite me into the room and tell her every single thing I said. It was terrible, hearing my own words against my mother, explaining the increasing abuse that she has begun to put me through, and straight to her face as she sat next to me. My grades in school began to drop. My mother forbade me from going out, and I was completely isolated. I ran into my mother's room looking for something. I remember rummaging through everything until I went into her walk-in closet. I had barely gone into her room. In fact, I completely forgot about the fact that she even had one of these. In my crazy state, I just remember running into her closet and looking through every crevice. I stumbled upon a suitcase leaning against the wall under the hung-up clothes. If I close my eyes, I can still imagine it. It didn't look old, so that was probably what made me decide to open it up. When I did, all I saw was a shit ton of papers. The surprise of seeing so much snapped me out of the state I was in, and I recall sitting cross-legged on the floor and wondering what the heck those papers were. After a while of reading, I realized that these were transcripts of Auntie's and my sessions, literally dating all the way back to some of the first sessions that I did. I remember feeling sick, feeling so sick. I at least had enough sense to steal a few of the papers to make it less noticeable. Reading through those transcripts just filled me up with more and more bitter questions, and I decided that night that I would figure out what was going on. I was on a time crunch, feeling stressed because I really only had a year left to figure out what the heck was going on, before I was faced with the looming threat of being kicked out as soon as I turned 18. I started to pay way more attention in our sessions, looking around her house whenever I got the chance to, looking for some indicators that could tell me who this psychologist really was. I started asking my mom more and more questions about Auntie, and she kept deflecting, repeating the same fact. She was a psychologist. That's until I did something that literally almost ruined the rest of my life. I decided to steal my mom's phone. It seems like a small thing now, but then it was really life or death. My mom was in the shower, and I had already packed all the stuff I needed to be out for a few hours, maybe even for a few nights somewhere. As soon as I heard the door lock, I swiped my mom's phone and bolted out of the house. I didn't even look down at the damn thing until I was on the bus. I remember looking through my mom's messages first, and I knew I found Auntie when I stumbled across an unfamiliar one. Even better when the messages clearly showed when my mother booked appointments. I scrolled up for a while, enough for the bus to get me to a safe place, but even as I walked off the bus and years of texts were read, nothing incriminating had shown itself. I then looked through my mother's call logs, and I saw the fact that they call extremely often. I wasn't an idiot. Whatever was really going on was happening on calls instead of messages, which was smart. I'll give credit where credit is due, but it still didn't get me anything. I found a place to sit at the end of the road, and I continued my search. I looked through my mom's social media, and when I tried searching up Auntie's name, nothing came up. I genuinely felt all hope leave my body then, and sometimes now I swear I can still feel the same sick feeling as I felt then. I almost gave up. Almost. Every day I thank myself for mindlessly swiping through my mother's followers because I found her. Her account name didn't have her real name, it was some weird fake one. But when I clicked on her profile, it was most definitely her. She posted photos with some of my mother's friends, and I scrolled for a while down her page until I saw a photo that I posted of her and my mother years ago. They have literally been friends even before I was born. I felt sick, betrayed, and a bit relieved that I now knew what the heck was going on. Why my mother had transcripts, and why Auntie didn't think twice before telling my mother every single thing I said, and why she defended her. I didn't even bother to find a place to stay that night. I just went back home. I got beaten black and blue for doing something that didn't deserve any forgiveness. It didn't hurt at all compared to what I found out earlier that day. All I asked my mother that night was, who is Auntie really? And she couldn't even answer that. A few years later, I was in my first year of university. I had the lucky chance to move out of my mother's house as soon as I got the chance to, with an old friend taking pity on me and allowing me to stay with him since we applied to the same university. He's one of my best friends now. What finally gave me closure in some bittersweet way was clearing out my Instagram. I deleted people that I didn't care about or didn't know. My heart dropped when I saw a familiar username in my followers. I didn't think about it at all when I searched up the username in the search bar, and when it came up with Auntie's Facebook account. This psycho had been following me for who knows how long on my Instagram, and suddenly everything that didn't click finally made sense. The sudden precise questions. Why did my mother suddenly decide to isolate me from my friends? It didn't even say psychologist or anything of the sort in her bio. Tell me why I said chemistry teacher with over 20 years. I admit that I cried like a baby that night because it had taken years for me to finally understand why two of my main female models seemed to despise me. Still to this day, I mourn the fact that most of my early adult years are being used to heal from everything in my childhood. Instead of going out with newly made friends and giving my all to university, it sucks. Everyone who hears my life story agrees on the fact that there's something wrong with them. I just wish I knew that sooner. 2 days ago, I had my first session with a real psychologist. Trust me, I did my research. I felt almost ashamed when I blurted out the reason why I'm sitting in this guy's chair. But he just smiled and told me we had a lot of work to do. Yeah, we do. LOL. I decided to post about my experience just in the slight chance anybody had a familiar experience with therapy becoming messed up, or they feel like they've been living in a hole their entire life. I promise you guys it gets better. With a little bit of luck and surrounding yourself with the right people at least. Anyways, Auntie, let's not meet again. Hey guys, here's a little update on the guy that was in my barn a bit ago. I did see him again, but I'll get to that. Plus some of my coworkers have noticed some things. So I worked 2 night shifts again this past weekend, and there are certain doors in the barn that I can't lock even if I want to, so I just have to be extra cautious about it. One of those nights I got there early in hope of maybe getting off before midnight. That being said, I was the only one there for a little bit. Stupid, I know, but I was tired and thought it would be nice to have a head start. I went out to the barn to get the first pen of milking cows. I just remember feeling overall uneasy. It might have been just me being paranoid given the previous situation. Well, that night I thought I saw somebody lurking in the pasture in which we had the heifers in earlier. I couldn't see very well because it was dark, but I swear that I saw an all too familiar smile with the little light I had coming from the silos. But I figured I was hallucinating, being a little bit skittish, so I brushed it off and went in the barn. I almost had the whole first pen to the parlor when my coworker showed up. We continued the night as usual, and then I had to start the pasteurizer. Of course, I didn't want to, but I had to. I went in there and the calves seemed fine. Everything seemed perfect. I looked around, not hard enough, you'll come to find, and everything was good. I went back to help milk the second pen. After that pen, I went to feed the calves while my coworker went to get the third pen like usual. Like I said, everything seemed fine. I was probably in there for around 20 minutes feeding the hutch cows bottles, which typically takes longer, and we had 6, so it took a little bit. Then I went to the far pens where I saw the man the last time and everything was alright. Then I went to feed the middle pens, and that's when something didn't seem right. One of the calves was lying down and refused to get up to eat, so I hopped the fence to help it up. Just a note, I set the pail of milk on the ground in between the 2 middle pens. I turned around once I got the calf up, and there he was. This time he was standing still smiling. I still couldn't really see his face because it was covered, but he was still wearing the same clothes, which was weird because it was 60-something degrees out that night. He wasn't overly tall or big, but just had a really creepy appearance and smile. He didn't say anything, just smiled. I have a knife on me for work purposes, usually to cut baling twine. So I pulled that out just to have it, and then I jumped the fence again and ran back to the parlor just as I had the last time. I was working with the same girl, and she and I literally locked ourselves in the break room again and called our boss. He got there and we went to the calf barn again, and everything was just as I left it except for one thing. The milk pail that had previously been filled to a mark on it was now empty, and the milk was all over the ground around it, but the pail was placed back upright. My boss didn't know what to tell us, but he stayed at the barn for the rest of the shift. My other coworkers started reporting things going missing, cows being moved, lights turning on and off, doors being left open, and milkers being turned off. One even said that the man was sitting in one of the empty calf hutches, and they didn't realize it wasn't a calf until they went to feed it, and he was just smiling at them. The cops had been notified, and we now have a cop parked by the barn every other night, and one that stays in the area at all times. I don't know where he was when I checked the barn before I started feeding, because he wasn't in that pen. I checked. He definitely has some sort of hiding spot that I didn't see him in, or he was moving around the milk house as I walked through it or something. But this guy really creeps me out, and lately I've been turning down night shifts. I'll keep you guys updated on how the cop thing works out and if I ever see him again. This whole thing just really freaks me out because I love my job and the people I work with, but I hate being afraid to go to work. So, to the guy who keeps showing up at my calf barn, please never come back. And let's never ever officially meet. First time posting a story, so I apologize for any errors. This was the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I've only ever told this to a few people because it does give me the chills every time I repeat it, but it's definitely worth telling. So a little info. I live in the New England area, East Coast, and this took place last November and ended around February of this year. So one day, my dad had to take me to school because my mom left early for work. I go to a private school, and about 5 minutes into the drive to school, I noticed that I forgot my ID card, which I need to walk around the school with. So my dad turned the car around and we drove back home. Now, my house is gated and you need a code to get in. After we got through the gate, my dad and I noticed that there was somebody peeking through the windows. There was no car parked in the driveway though. I was a bit freaked out because I had no idea how this guy got in. The only way to get onto our property is by putting the code in at the gate. And no, he couldn't have jumped the gate. The sensor would have gone off. My dad tells me to wait inside the car and to lock the doors. He gets out and walks up to the guy that I can now see is about 40 or so. Now, this part gets a bit weird, but it's not uncommon at the same time. My dad looks exactly like Leonardo DiCaprio, and he gets told that almost every day. The next thing I know is, this guy asks for my dad's autograph and asks if he can take a picture with him. Very odd, I know. My dad nervously laughs and backs away a little bit. We could tell that this guy had some problems, so my dad offered to call somebody for him or even a cab. The guy says, "No, I'm good," and starts walking down our driveway. Okay, ready for this? When he gets to the gate, he puts the frickin' code in. Like, how did he know it? My dad then starts shouting at him and starts running down the driveway. This beat up white car stops, picks up the guy, and they take off. My dad goes inside our house, checks the place out, and calls me to let me know I can come in. Fast forward to mid-November. I should mention that I was 16 when this started. I turned 17 in late November. I'm also an only child, if that's even important. So, one night my parents and I are having dinner and talking when the phone rings. We don't take calls during dinner, so we let the answering machine take it. Then we hear this really creepy voicemail. "Hey buddy, smoking wife, you got there?" And that daughter laughs. She's a peach. My dad got up and picked up the phone, but the person on the other line had hung up. I'm not really one to get freaked out easily, but I was very scared and I didn't sleep a wink that night. I should mention that by this time we had completely forgotten about that guy on our property. Over the next 2 weeks, we got some really creepy phone calls, some in the middle of the night. Sometimes I would sleep on the couch in my parents' room, but let me just quickly tell you how awesome my dad is. He would stay up downstairs while my mom and I slept. And sometimes when I couldn't sleep, he and I would watch funny movies and play board games. He is incredibly protective of my mother and me, and he did everything he could to keep us safe and feel safe. For my birthday, my family and I went to New York for a few days. When we got back, everything seemed fine, until we started unpacking and noticed that some things were missing, like a few family photos, 2 of my dad's Rolex watches, and some of my mom's jewelry. Not knowing what else to do, we called the police. My dad is a surgeon and he is sometimes on call, so he often would have to leave late at night, at which point my mom and I would sleep in the same room. My teacher noticed a huge change in me. I was always sleeping in class. I lost a lot of weight and I just looked like a complete wreck in general. My teachers expressed these concerns with my parents, to which my mom and dad had decided to send me to therapy. The phone calls started coming almost every day now. One day at school, the office called me down to the front desk. I was informed that a relative was there to pick me up. My mind started going to a million different places. I was scared that something happened to my parents. I asked who it was and they said it was my uncle. Now, this is where I got a little bit confused. I only have one uncle and he lives in London. I explained that there must have been a mistake and the lady at the front desk pointed to the main entrance in the lobby. I had never seen him in my entire life. I told the lady that I wanted to speak to the principal. My parents were called to the school and I left early that day, and my mom and dad were very uncomfortable sending me to school the next day, so I ended up staying home for a few days. Long story short, this stalker issue became so big that we actually ended up moving to New York City. But before that, it was getting out of control. People showed up to the door, even after we changed our code to get in. We just felt unsafe, and I never want to feel that fright ever again, and I hope none of you ever have to experience that feeling. But thankfully nothing has happened since we moved, and I'm just so thankful that I had my family with me. So, to the stalkers who haunted my family for months, you better hope we don't meet again. Okay, so this happened a few years ago when I was beginning 9th grade. Forgive me if it gets to be a bit long. That's the nature of the narrative. Beware in advance, this is not one of those stories where something unexpected and creepy happens at the end. But the aftermath is still tragic beyond belief and left me permanently changed. Just for the reader to get a better picture, I live in the capital city of a third world country, and malls and cineplexes had fairly recently become a fad among the well-to-do in urban areas. A couple of girlfriends and I had gone out for a movie and dinner afterwards, at TGIF's, go figure. The subway system had also recently finished construction and become immensely popular here, so I thought, what the heck, I can take the subway. The subway stop was pretty close to our house as well, so it was really convenient. As I messed around on my phone trying to pass the time, I could see a boy no older than 18 or 19 constantly stealing covert glances at me. In that moment, all my feminist angst went out the window, and I can honestly admit I wished I hadn't worn a dress, thinking maybe he wouldn't stare if I had worn something more covering. Anyways, my stop arrived, and as one does at one stop, I got up and started to leave. This boy also got off at the same stop. Now in these types of stories, people often say how they knew something was off or weird. I didn't. He wasn't anything other than the standard issue creep I was used to in this city. This guy then falls into step a bit behind me, but not too far either. No issue. I am still thinking. No need to be paranoid. By now though, it's about 10 p.m, so I am getting worried and uneasy. It doesn't help that the street is practically empty, flanked by large houses and broken street lamps that light up jack shit. I can hear him murmuring into his cell phone, so I'm thinking maybe he really doesn't care about me. Then after some time, I notice he isn't there anymore. Yay. But I don't want to take any chances, so I call up my brother to just come and get me, and we'll walk the short way home together. So as I am walking my way and hoping my brother will catch up with me any second now, I see his shoe poking out of the alley. I just know it's that guy. Then I notice something that gives me chills even now. He's standing next to 3 other guys, and they're all jerking off together right there on the street. I'm scared shitless because A, I was a sheltered kid in a country where sex education is what is called literally taboo beyond belief, and B, who does that? I turned around and started walking away fast, hoping they didn't notice. But they did. They zip up their pants and sort of advance towards me. Not exactly threateningly, but definitely sneering at me trying to get away. I'm quickening my pace, but I know if I run, they'll run too and catch up with me. If I keep walking up ahead, it's a road that goes on for miles and miles, so I'm walking fast. Police number ready to dial, waiting for my brother to appear any second now, hoping these guys will go away. I was wearing a dress that buttons down the front, and one of the guys comes straight up before I'm able to run or dial the cops in, forcefully tears the first button off. A bit of my bra is now exposed. At this point, I know I'm going to be assaulted or murdered, and where the heck is my brother? Just wow. One of the guys is holding an iron rod about 3.5 feet in length. In our native language, he says, "They're going to shove it up my cunt and then my ass." And the button-ripping guy firmly holds my wrist. Just then, I hear loud footsteps. My brother. Now I think the guys thought that they could take him because he was just one guy and sneered at me again when I called out to him, almost crying and desperate, but they didn't realize one important thing. My brother is a 6'4" pro tennis player who bench presses more than these guys' body weight put together. As he gets close, they freak out. The original guy snatches a necklace I was wearing straight off my neck, and they all run. I'm shaken and scared, but it's over now, so I go home, tell my parents, and we decide that we're going to go to the police the next morning. The next morning, we do go to the police. Magically, they show us pictures of each guy. I'm really surprised because A, police here have a terrible track record investigating assault-type cases, and B, how did they do it without an actual complaint? They then tell my parents, who later tell me that these guys went on to brutally assault somebody 5 kilometers away from my neighborhood. Chillingly, they'd taken my necklace and put it around the person's neck that they left for dead. But they were seen on tape by traffic cameras doing their heinous act and had been caught, and then it also admitted to harassing a girl of my description in my neighborhood earlier in the evening, before progressing to their final act. So I come from a really rich family which is fairly well known in political and business circles in my city. This is kind of relevant in two ways because A, this was why these guys were indicted fairly fast, and as my parents put a lot of pressure on the authorities. And B, I struggled with being angry at why wealth was such an important factor in these cases. Because assault is assault, right? The final few things I want to say are these. Even coming from a well-respected family, the policeman asked me why I was wearing a dress, implying that I was asking for it. Another appalling realization I had was, if I were not well-known or connected, if I were just a normal girl out with my friends, would any police personnel investigate my claims? If I didn't call my brother, would I be alive? Heck, most girls my age don't even have cell phones here. They couldn't call anyone. Finally, was I the cause of that person's assault and murder? What if they did that to her because they lost access to me? She belonged to a very poor family. If my parents hadn't intervened, if I weren't involved, would those men have walked free? If I didn't have stigma-free access to expensive therapy, would I ever be mentally sound again? This whole incident left me afraid of my own city and country. To this day, I haven't worn a dress outside after 5 p.m. It left me with a deep skepticism for law enforcement. I still feel a little bit guilty for that person that ended up dying and had their right to life taken away. And I still have concerns about how my family's wealth became such an important factor in this case. What about all the girls who can't afford all of my privileges? To end on a brighter note, I really have gotten over everything that happened to an extent. I'm even leaving home to study in the USA at a great university this year, and I am determined to not let this event determine what I do with my life in the future. To preface this, I am currently 19 going on 20. Due to a vindictive teacher, she manipulated the grades so I would have to repeat the 3rd grade because I called another student a brat for crying about wanting her mom. The context behind it is irrelevant, but the rundown is this girl thought because her mom was a teacher that she could cry her way into her mom's class. Her mom was a high school teacher and would almost always cry and cry until she was allowed to go, and her poor daughter would be distraught having to leave for class and pick her daughter up because she wanted attention. I ended up snapping and telling the girl that she's in 3rd grade and is way too old to be crying for her mom and disrupting other students leaving. Probably harsh, but you could tell this girl was spoiled. On to the actual person in question. In August of 2023, I was in my junior year. I went to a trade school in Sumeru County for graphic design. A sophomore named James had taken notice that I wouldn't be dropped off at our home school like he was. He offered to drive me home. I don't know this kid well. I spoke to him a few times, but other than that, I wasn't buddy-buddy with him. I told him my mom prefers to meet people before just letting me ride in a random person's car, especially a guy. With me being 18 at the time, I told him that if he got into a wreck, I would be responsible as the adult in the car. After that, he really didn't bother me with anything. We still talked and could tell he wasn't neurotypical. It wasn't until my senior year that things got creepy. We exchanged numbers because I would sometimes help him with homework he didn't fully understand and give recommendations of horror channels on YouTube such as Reddit stories, creepypasta readings, or channels that cover disturbing videos like Hannah the Horrible or Nick Crowley or even Nexpo. Within a month he found my home address. I never told him where I lived and he got dropped off way earlier than me. The way the homeschool worked was that all of the students on the west side of the Fontaine going into Solani would go to one singular middle school and high school, while students from East Fontaine going into Louis would go to another high school. I never told this kid where I lived, let alone a rough area. I started documenting everything at this point, no matter how big or small. In the next following months, if I would fall asleep on the bus, he would tap my headphones, snap them on my ears, kick my legs, shake me, or call my phone just so I would talk to him. In April, he asked me to go to prom with him, and I tried to tell him multiple times that I wasn't interested, and he tried to manipulate me, to which I just lied to him and told him that I had a family event that day. After that, I said something to the principal about him harassing and shaming people to go to prom, and he gave the most insincere apology ever. He worded it like it was a forced apology. I get a phone call the next day from him asking if my sister drove a red car and worked at Sangonomiya Coffee House. I quickly told him no and blocked his number. I went to administration, coupled with the fact that this kid would call to ask if I went to the Dollar General, went to work, or was at home, and told me thoughts he had about killing his mom's boyfriend, how he wanted to smash his teeth in and smacking his phone against the window, and tried to manipulate me into calling while he was having a panic attack, and ranted about how my math teacher needed to be gutted because she was overweight and that fat women are ugly and horrible vessels for producing babies. And she's not overweight from poor diet. She has a medical condition that caused the buildup of estrogen. The worst was when he lashed out in anger about him losing his AirPod case and aggressively stomping on his AirPods, and literally foaming at the mouth. I went to the principal and liaison after this, only to be unable to talk, and they yelled at me for an hour about how I was being mean to a kid on the spectrum and that my information, my mom's information and my sister's information, are public. I started having a panic attack and called my mom. At this point, I was literally vomiting in the trash can in the conference room. My mom was pissed. She told me to call the sheriff's office after I get home. The sheriff actually went to this kid's house and told him to knock this stuff off, or he had every right to file stalking and harassment charges. The 180 Women's Shelter confirmed that what the principal and liaison did was disgusting and dangerous. So far I haven't seen him, and I still have his number blocked. Hopefully I don't see this little bastard anymore. To James, if you see this post by some chance, stay away from me and my sister. I hope your future general finds out about this stuff. Yeah, that's right. This dude wants to be in the army. Should I see him again, I won't hesitate to press charges against him, and I don't care if it ruins his life forever, because he's a danger to those around him. Okay, so this whole thing began maybe 2 months ago. At my aunt's party, my sister comes up to me and says that she thinks somebody has been coming into her house in the middle of the night. My sister has always been easily scared, so at first, I was skeptical. I asked her how she knew somebody had been in the house, whether she had actually seen anyone. She told me she hadn't seen anyone, but she said that she knows for a fact somebody was in her house. She then went on to explain that she has a skybox downstairs that streams to her bedroom television. The first time it happened, she said she heard the TV was being used, so she turned on her TV and somebody was flicking through the channels. I still didn't really buy what she was saying, but she did seem genuinely afraid. She claimed it had been going on for 3 months on and off. To put her mind at ease, I told her I'd stay at her place for a few nights and wait to see if the guy comes. I took my younger brother along just to be safe. In all, we stayed at her place for 4 nights. In those 4 nights, nothing unusual happened. I and my brother were convinced that she was going crazy. My brother and I decided that we had stayed long enough and told her that we had to go home. She got extremely upset about this. I reassured her and told her to call the police the next time it happened. She had called the police once before about the guy, and they turned up to find that nobody was in the house. I said she could call me anytime that she wanted and left for work. 2 days later, she called me at 11:30 p.m. and claimed he was downstairs in her house right now. I asked her how she knew, and she said he was walking around the house. She was whispering and crying. I knew she wasn't making this up. I could tell from her voice. I called my brother and told him to meet me at her house. I was on the phone with her the entire drive over to her place. I lived 10 minutes away. When I got there, my brother was parked outside. We both went to the back of the house. I was still on the phone with my sister. The first floor of the house was lit solely by the TV in the living room. As we approached the patio door, we saw that a man was sitting on the couch facing us. We were frozen solid, and my sister noticed that we went quiet and started asking what was wrong and if we could see him. I told her to stay quiet and that we had it in hand. I then hung up and called the police to explain the situation. The guy hadn't moved from the couch at all. The TV turned off while we were waiting for the cops. I and my brother majorly freaked out when it happened. We couldn't see anything downstairs, then the hallway light turned on, meaning somebody was in the hallway. We opened the patio door and ran up the stairs and caught the guy with his ear to her door. We kicked the shit out of him and got my sister out of the house. He had a knife in his coat pocket. The cops came maybe 10 minutes later. He could have killed her if he wanted to, which is outrageous. It turns out that the guy was one of our mom's old boyfriends who had lived with us for a while in the 90s. He had always been fond of my sister, but we had never suspected it to be him. He hadn't contacted any of us for nearly a decade. My sister has moved back in with my mom and is undergoing therapy to get over what has happened. Our stepdad, as he liked to call himself, was given 3 years in prison, and we are doing our best to cut all ties with the man. This story happened to me and my girlfriend, now fiance. To give you some context, she and I met online in 2015 and fell in love. We communicated via Skype for 3 years because we lived in separate countries until I came to live with her in February of 2018. So, a few weeks or so before I flew to meet her, she had made friends with a group of guys in her hometown, and I got to meet them shortly after living with her. They ranged in age from 16 to 18, and they would come over to visit us very often because we lived close to the high school they attended. At first, I found it a bit weird that they would always come over and take up so much of our time, but they turned out to be really good friends over time. One of them even agreed to become one of my groomsmen recently. But back then, there was one in particular that always bugged me. That was Dan. As I mentioned earlier, the guys would come and visit and hang out with us a lot, but Dan was the one that would always take up most of our time. I say this in the sense that he would message us nearly almost every day, asking if we were home and if he could come over, and would proceed to spend almost the entire day, from morning to night or early afternoon to night, depending on his work schedule, at our place. He would also go out of his way to meet us and bump into us wherever we went, whether it was the store, a coffee shop, or any other place you could think of. While I found this annoying, there wasn't anything particularly creepy or weird going on yet. Mind you, we live in a small town where it's almost impossible to not run into somebody you know on the way to buy groceries or something like that. Plus, I'd only known him for about as long as my fiance had known him, which wasn't a very long time, so I thought I was just maybe judging him too harshly. Also, he was in a long-distance relationship with a girl from another country who he was hoping to meet in real life, just like me, so I could at least relate to him in that aspect. I decided to let it slide, but made a note to keep an eye out for any suspicious behavior. The problem seemed to start once he also tried to incorporate himself into other aspects of our life. He would make friends with anyone that we'd been friends with for a long time, tag along with us whenever we were going to meet up with said friends, even though he hadn't been invited, hang out with them without us knowing and stuff like that. My favorite instance, and the one that made me become more suspicious of him, was one time when we were going to hang out with some longtime friends of my fiance. As the friend had finished her shift and we were getting ready to get into her car to drive over to her place, Dan suddenly shows up and joins us at their place uninvited. It was just so off-putting that he would invite himself over without our friends or even our permission. Then when we were done there and walking home, the three of us passed by his house. We lived further away at the time and assumed that he would go home, but nope. He kept tagging along with us with the excuse that he needed to buy something at the store, which was BS since all stores had been closed for over an hour and he knew it. So he kept walking with us until at one point when we were almost home, we put our foot down and told him that we were tired and just wanted to go to sleep as soon as we got home, and told him to go home. It took us 10 minutes to convince him, during which he would react to our requests with awkward and creepy silences until he finally headed home annoyed. My fiance, concerned that she'd offended him, asked if he wanted to hang out with us later in the week. What followed were various weeks of him coming over to our place, staying until late at night and slowly leaving more and more of his stuff at our place so he had an excuse to come over. I shit you not. He once brought over his PS3 with a bag of 30 or so games which stayed there for 3 months. It got to the point where people thought he moved in with us. He also seemed to have problems with all of our friends. Among other things, he would get into arguments with our friends and told one friend who was goofing around at our place once that he would kill him if he didn't shut up. He lied to us and made us believe that 2 good friends of ours wanted to report us to the police, lying saying that we drugged our friends. I mentioned earlier that some of them were 16 at the time. He allegedly hit one of our friend's girlfriends once. This was never confirmed, but I have no reason to believe it's a lie. It was like he wanted us all to himself and to isolate us from our friends. The last thing he did, which ended up being the key to us getting rid of him forever, was that he started dating my fiance's cousin MJ. He broke up with his long-distance girlfriend under suspicious circumstances and started dating her. As a result, whenever MJ came to visit, Dan would come along as well. My fiance wanted to hang out with MJ. There was Dan. Even when he was dating someone else, his obsession with us never ended. One day when we were in town, we met another friend of ours, and Dan insisted that we hang out with that guy all day when we already agreed to do something else. When we refused, he and MJ ditched us to be with him, and that was when we had enough. We got into a huge fight later that day in the park with some of our friends as witnesses and told him off, telling him we wanted nothing to do with him anymore and to pack up his stuff and never show his face at our place again. This unfortunately resulted in my fiance and MJ not talking to each other for a long time. We had to move a few times since then, the most recent being February of last year, and we never saw him and blocked him on all of our social media and blocked him out of our lives. We know from friends that he tried a few times to ask around where we live, but our friends always have our backs and don't tell him. MJ and my fiance recently made up after she dumped him, and now that sour taste he left behind is for the most part gone. It goes without saying that we never want to see him again. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect to get this many upvotes, so thanks guys. I realize there are a lot of questions or gaps to fill in, so I will try my best to fill them in here. 1. People have asked if he had parents or what his home life was like and whether this might have affected his behavior. He does have parents, but I have no idea what his home life was like. All I know from friends and hearsay is that he apparently has violent tendencies and that his family had to move from his hometown in the past because he'd been accused of allegedly assaulting a teenage girl. I don't know if it's true or not, but considering what we've discussed here, I wouldn't rule it out. He can also be manipulative and tries to use people to get what he wants. He was 18 when we first met him and should be 20 by now. We found out recently that he moved out of his parents' house and got his own place now. 2. Some people have considered the possibility that he might have been in love or obsessed with my girlfriend. While I wouldn't rule it out, it was after talking to my fiance's cousin that we figured out another possible explanation. Dan loves to talk about cars, and he found out that my father-in-law likes to collect vintage cars, and that he'd recently gotten his hands on a vintage highway patrol police car. As I mentioned, he tries to use people to get what he wants, and he figured if he could get along with us well enough that he'd get a chance to ride shotgun with him or even borrow the car. There was no chance that would happen though, since daddy-in-law treats that car like his own son and would never let anyone else drive it, so yeah, tough luck, Danny. 3. To the people commenting how weird it was that we were hanging out with 16 to 18-year-olds. First of all, yes, we do have lots of friends our own age, and we do hang out plenty with them as well. I'll admit I found it weird myself at first when they would always come over and want to hang out with us, and I was concerned about whatever rumors might start floating around. But the more I got to know them, the more I understood that they were pretty down to earth overall. Yeah, they could goof around a bit when we were hanging out, but for the most part, they were surprisingly mature for their age. Also, they would always ask first if they could come over, and they trusted us enough to confide in us with whatever was on their mind. Also, their parents know us and trust us as well, and they didn't feel the need to keep it a secret that they were friends with us. One friend's mom had recently died of cancer at the time, and we had found out from his father that he seemed happier and less depressed about it whenever he came home after spending time with us. Besides, we like to consider our home a safe space where anyone is welcome, regardless of age, gender, race, etc. Well, not literally everyone, but you know what I mean. And while in hindsight, that might have been part of the reason why somebody like Dan slithered their way into our lives, as long as you're respectful and kind, we wouldn't have it any other way. This happened probably 5 or 6 years ago. I think I was 18 at the time. For starters, I lived in a city where neighborhoods and forests kind of blend together. There are plenty of wooded areas where people go to have bonfires and parties. One night, after discovering that all of our usual spots were crowded with people, I suggested that we go to a spot that I had been to a few times nearby. I had been there multiple times, but only during the day. The street where we park is maybe 200 feet from the tree line. It's your average middle-class neighborhood. Nothing crazy is really known to happen there. So we walk in, start a bonfire, and we're all having a good time. Some of us are drinking and smoking a bit, myself included. After about 45 minutes pass by and I'm a little bit intoxicated, but nothing major. Over the sound of our quiet music and my friends talking, I hear something weird. I can't make out what it is, so I figure maybe I'm just hearing stuff. Another 10 minutes go by and I hear it again, a little bit better this time. It still sounds relatively far away, but it sounds like Velcro tearing. I stop and kind of just sit there trying to listen while my friends carry away laughing and talking. I haven't seemed to notice, and that's when I heard a sound that I was very familiar with. A zapping noise, like you hear from a taser. Very brief, but unmistakable. My stomach drops and I start looking around a little frantically. My girlfriend at the time was the first to notice my distress. She asks me what's wrong and I explain, and she immediately starts worrying. She gets my friends to quiet down and we all just sit there and listen for a bit. Then we all hear it. An electric zap. Brief again, but we all know that sound. We all start panicking a bit and we quickly put out the fire while asking each other what the heck that was or where exactly it was coming from. We are all scared to walk out. It's only maybe a 5-minute walk to the street, but dark. We all muster the courage to finally walk the path out, and we don't run into anyone. We finally get to the street and start walking to our cars, nervously laughing and relishing being under the street lamps again. I see him first. He's walking toward us, not at us, just walking in the direction we just came from, slightly to the right of us. He's holding a stick of some sort. It scared me at first, but for a brief second I calmed myself. It was a pretty safe neighborhood that I knew really well, and it was really common to see people out walking at night. But then I noticed he's looking right at us. That stare is burned into my mind. We pass each other. My friends and I are all silent as we're having this stare down with this random man. And that's when it happened. He doesn't break eye contact, holds up the pole, and smiles this creepy smile. His eyes are open so wide. The end of the stick lights up bright, and that same zapping sound happens again, much louder this time. He's holding a cattle prod. We live in a city, no farmland nearby, no reason to have a cattle prod. My friends and I are silently shitting ourselves as he walks past us, maybe 20 feet away, and goes straight into the woods without a flashlight or anything. We all got into our cars and peeled out of there. We never went back to that spot. Two years ago, when I was a sophomore in high school, I started dating someone, Grayson. Our relationship was very explosive and toxic, but that is not what this story is primarily about. Grayson's dad always gave me the creeps. I believe in a way he was a pathological liar. Here's some background. Tim is really full of himself. He believes he's established his own businesses and thinks he's come up with innovative war tactics that the government is using thanks to him. I also have reason to believe that he was dishonorably discharged from the military. Grayson always told me that he left the Air Force to come home and be with his wife. He doesn't have his uniform. He doesn't have any paperwork regarding this. However, leaving because your wife misses you isn't a valid excuse in the military. At first it seemed innocent, such as giving me and my mom his cell phone number in case we need to be in touch. Grayson was always bad about ignoring texts from his dad in school, so I'd find him and tell him his dad was waiting outside for him. But it got kind of weird. He would go out of his way to text me and my mom for non-Grayson related matters. He would often invite me over when Grayson was not over to do things such as Grayson's laundry or to bake cookies, or to even wait until he gets home to surprise him. My mom never let me, nor did I really want to go because I knew this was weird. Anytime Grayson and I were on the phone, his dad would start saying really mean things to him, yelling at him, calling him all kind of names. It always made me uncomfortable because I'd come around and his dad would act very different. He started treating Grayson and me anytime like we were on playdates, like we were children. He would often remark about me being his stepdaughter to strangers, and this man could talk. He would talk to anyone and everyone regardless of whether they seemed up for the conversation or not, which made it really awkward for us because Grayson would have his arm wrapped around me or we would be affectionate, and him saying that would make things awkward for us. I remember trying to tell Grayson several times that his dad really freaked me out, and my parents were not happy about his dad either. He didn't really understand. He told me he had lost his daughter at birth and that maybe him acting that way was his way of coping with it. Grayson's dad, Tim, had recently gotten close with a neighbor at the apartment complex. She had a daughter. Kelly was 6, maybe 7 years old. Her mom was a deadbeat, would only come around Tim whenever she needed money to get cigarettes or drugs. But she did not hesitate to let Kelly spend several hours alone with Tim, or to let Tim pick her up from school. I remember one specific time that he brought Kelly along to pick Grayson up from my house. It was cold. He sent her to my door in pajamas. We had been watching a scary movie, and when she saw Grayson, she excitedly said, "Tim is taking me to see Moana." It was 11 p.m. It was really late, and I was extremely bewildered. Kelly eventually got taken away from her mother and was in a foster home. Tim would try to get me or Grayson to go to the door and leave stuff for her to have from Tim. Then he eventually even tried to get custody of her, regardless of the fact that there was no blood relation or any credentials that would allow him to do so. Another time around the Super Bowl, he had come up to the door with a beer bottle in hand. He doesn't even ask to come in. He just kind of forces the door open and comes into the bathroom to pee. He then takes Grayson, beer bottle in hand, and drives home. Here's a list of other things that I remember happening, but it's been over a few years, so there is more, but I cannot recall every detail. One time, Tim texted my mom and inquired about me and Grayson. We had been arguing, and we argued a lot. His dad then jokingly asks my mom, supposedly, "Is she on her period?" I get it is a crude joke and many guys joke about it, but imagine someone texting you and asking on your daughter's behalf. Another time, Grayson and I were giggling and making jokes in the back seat. I remember his dad was always talking about me and Grayson getting married. I was a sophomore, he was a freshman. So we thought about it, yeah, but it was ideally going to happen? Not really. Grayson did said something along the lines of getting married. I don't think so. His dad then says, "Well, if you don't marry her, then I will." I was shocked that something like that would even be said. I was at that point very weirded out. He asked me to go out to the Golden Corral with him and Grayson. I knew Grayson was at his mom's house, but for some reason, I thought he had already come home and was with his dad. Got into his dad's car. I was just in the car with him and two other older men. I started furiously texting Grayson. I asked him where he was and if he was actually going. But he was asleep and he didn't even know his dad had come and gotten me. His mom was pissed. She chewed his dad out on the phone while it was on the car speaker and I was sitting behind his seat. She said he needed to stop with this weird behavior. We go inside the restaurant and I'm quiet, just waiting for Grayson to text me. I'm upset and confused. He finally comes in and he was mortified. I wanted so badly to go home, but I didn't want to make a scene by leaving, so I tolerated it. Our last and final argument ensued. It was because Grayson had started talking to other girls. Grayson made it very clear that he did not permit me to talk to other boys. I unadded every boy I had in social media, so this really distraught me. After everything our relationship went through, there were other signs that I ignored too, about how he surrounded himself with girls when I wasn't around and how he touched other girls in his gym class. But this was the final and last time I wanted to be walked all over. I snitched on him to his dad. I didn't explicitly say what Grayson had did, but I did ask him to delete my number and told him I wouldn't come around anymore. His dad told me that I was being unreasonable and that his son was a gentleman and that he raised his son well enough and that his son wouldn't cheat. It was a lot more drama than I needed, so at the end of it all, I blocked him on everything. Tim started trying to reach out to me through his Facebook account and through his business account. I often just blocked him and didn't tell my mom because I felt like it was old news. A few months ago, I reached out to Grayson. Grayson had taken my virginity. I was embarrassed to tell him that I had an STI and that he needed to be checked. A week or two later, I got a letter in the mail. His dad, Tim, decided to reach out to me. Keep in mind, me and Grayson had only talked about the STI stuff. Nothing more. We had been apart for 2 years. I still lived at the same address. I suppose he had told his dad he needed testing done, and his dad took it upon himself to discipline me. Now 18 years old. I'll retype a few things said on this card. The front of the card says, "Which first, pout or cry?" With a little girl in pigtails on the front pouting. Opening the card, it originally just says, "Miss you." And written all over the card, "You are too smart for irresponsible behavior. Respect yourself and respect your body. Reach for the stars. Achieve your goals and get your education. Don't blow it now. Hang on, baby girl. If you need me, just call. If you need a ride or just someone to talk to, your friend Tim." Picture your future present tense. Achieve your dreams. Hey dear, respect yourself. Don't throw yourself at boys. If a guy truly loves you, he will hold on to you. There are many diseases out there, and some are incurable. Reserve sex for marriage, and do right by God. Don't become a baby mama. You are smart, pretty, nice, and sincere. Don't let the world change you. I wasn't the one to open the card. My mom was, as she had recognized the name. She called the cops and had them investigate it further. The cops even remarked that this behavior was strange and should be looked into. I don't really know all of the details. I was working when all of this went down. We still have the card on my mom's nightstand as evidence just in case this were to go any further. His older brother, Tyler, works at a bar-type restaurant that we frequent a lot. He and I don't really make small talk. We act like we don't know each other, but the way he looks at me, I can tell in a way he feels sorry. I truly empathize with him, because he too has a long-term girlfriend, and I can imagine his dad is doing the same thing to them. It's gotten so bad that one of his older sons, who has his first grandchildren, is moving away to get away from him. His wife doesn't like Tim, and even though he can see through the man his dad proclaims to be. I apologize if this is all scattered and it doesn't really add up. It has been a while and I haven't really typed it all out or really talked to anyone about this other than my immediate family. I have other reasons to believe that maybe Tim isn't mentally sound and he uses Catholicism to back up his reasoning for many things he does wrong in life. I think maybe the reason why our relationship failed was because Grayson's dad mistreated him, and going to his mom's house was an escape from that. I think that is truly why Grayson treated me how he did, and it breaks my heart for him. But I am glad that I am well out of that relationship. Well out of having to deal with his dad and in a brand new relationship with a family that adores me. While this is an extreme, I really hope that I will never be involved with Tim or affiliate with any of the members of his family again. After following this subreddit for a while, I always end up thinking back to a situation that happened to me in my childhood. I don't usually post anything, so I made an account just to share this story. This happened when I was 9. Keep in mind I was very short. Still am, and was the smallest girl in my age group, so I was an easy target to say the least. When I was young, my family moved us from a third world country in Asia to a western safe country. During that time, foreigners weren't that widespread here, so in fear of being discriminated against, my parents weren't fond of asking for help, even from police. This is important later. My family was not well off, and to keep afloat, my parents had to work very long hours, often leaving me home alone for a few hours after school. I had been walking home from school with my neighbor Dan, who was my age, when I noticed he kept looking behind us with a troubled expression on his face, as if something were wrong. Every time I turned around, though, I saw no one. Whenever I asked him what was up, he just dismissed it and said nothing. Thinking back on it now, I think he didn't want to scare me. I brushed it off as Dan playing a prank on me, though, and we went home even though my gut was telling me something wasn't right. After about 20 minutes of being at home, I suddenly hear a loud knock on the door. This was very unusual, as nobody usually visited, so to me, this was already a huge red flag. I crept to a window that had a view of the porch and discreetly lifted the corner of the curtain to see who it was without being detected. I saw a tall man around mid to late 20s with short hair, and he was wearing a long black coat with black pants. What scared me was his demeanor. He looked very tense, almost angry, and was glaring at the door very hard. I barely saw him blink. All the while, he was constantly knocking. I watched him for a couple of minutes until it seemed like he was leaving. I immediately called my parents, and they told me to never answer the door, that it was probably a door-to-door salesperson or something. I thought that maybe they were right until the knocking soon began again. Only this time he was pounding the door, almost as if he wanted to break it. I was so terrified. He kept pounding, and after a solid 10 minutes he shouted, "I know you're in there, little girl." I nearly lost my shit. I frantically kept calling my parents, telling them what I heard, and I think this man was going to try and hurt me. My parents, not wanting to get in trouble for leaving a 9-year-old home, the legal age here is 14, to be able to stay home alone, didn't want to call the police and kept telling me if I just hunkered down into the room furthest in the house and waited, he would go away. Now, to be fair, my parents aren't horrible or uncaring. The house is built solidly, and there was no way of entering or exiting except for the heavy front door where the man was. Even the windows weren't easily accessible. But all this meant to me was that I was trapped. I remember crying so hard and being terrified for my life, but trying to be silent, just in the off chance the man could hear me. By this point, the man kept alternating between pounding the door and staying very still and silent. I knew this because I kept creeping back to the window, hoping the silence meant he went away, but he was always there, giving that same intense, hateful stare as if he wanted to make me feel it through the door. It felt like he had been standing there for hours, but in reality, this whole ordeal lasted about 20 minutes. Thankfully, after that 20 minutes, I heard nothing and couldn't see him either. Not long after that, my mom came home early to check up on me. She checked around the whole house and the surrounding area and even asked the neighbors, but the man left no trace and nobody else had seen him. The only sign he was there was a couple of scratches on the door. When Dan was questioned by the adults, he just said that he noticed a man following us from near the school area, but the man kept his distance so he couldn't get a good look at him. He also wasn't sure whether it was just somebody who happened to be walking the same way as us, so he didn't want to say anything. We never found out what the man wanted with me. After that, I wasn't allowed to be home alone for a long time. Instead of going home, I'd go to Dan's house after school until one of my parents picked me up. As far as I know, I never saw the man again. Honestly, I wish they called the police because after that day, I became permanently paranoid about strangers. To this day, I still get anxiety if somebody knocks on my door, even if I'm expecting someone. This story is about an event that happened to my mother around 1972 when she was 8 years old. She told me about it since I was young, and she truly thinks about it and is affected to this day. To set the scene, both of my grandparents ran a restaurant and gas station in our hometown. They have always run a business of some type since the 50s. This means that a lot of days my mom would have to take the school bus home and stay by herself if my grandma had to stay and help run things. Usually no more than an hour or two. My uncle, her older brother, would usually come home on the bus with her, but he was a little bit older and sometimes had football practice, so was the case on the day of the event I'm getting to. My mother arrived home on this day, let herself into the house, and put away her things. She had just recently received a new puppy and knew the first thing that she needed to do was take the pup out to the yard to use the restroom. She wrapped the dog in a white towel. This is important, and walked him outside. As she put down the dog, she shook its hair out of the blanket, flailing it about in the wind. It's then she noticed the neighbor's son was staring at her from across the street. This guy was in his late 20s and was known to be very strange and mentally ill. Though in the country, mental illness seems to not always be recognized. He would always do psycho stuff like killing the neighbor's pigs or skinning stray cats and hanging them from a clothesline in their yard. Real sick stuff. My mom said he always creeped her and everybody else out. She said he would stare at her when she would play outside and made her feel generally uncomfortable. She said he appeared out of nowhere in his yard that day, and as she shook out the blanket, he had begun grinning and waving. Feeling more than a little shocked, she picked up her pup, went inside, and locked the door. She began to do some homework, and after about 5 minutes of work, she heard a loud knock at the door. She slowly walked to the window to see who it was. She knew it wasn't my grandparents because, of course, they had keys. As she opened the blinds, her eyes locked with those of the creep from across the street, like he was already looking in the window. She jumped and said she screamed like just a little bit as she shut the blinds. She walked to the door and made sure it was locked. She said he just continued with a slow, continuous thud on the door, almost in a rhythm. Then she got really terrified as he began speaking to her through the door. "Hi, sweetie. I saw you with your dog. Let me in to see him." She was obviously in shock. "Come on. Let me in, sweetie, please. I want to see the puppy." In full freak-out mode, my mom screamed, "You need to leave now. You need to go back to your house. I don't know you." But he kept knocking. I can see the fear in my mom's eyes when she describes that part, and it gives my whole body chills. He said, "Damn it. Let me in. I saw you waving your flag of surrender." I kid you not. The guy thought my mom shaking her hair from the blanket was a flag of surrender and a sign for him to come over. My mom screamed that I'm calling my dad and the police if you don't leave now. With this, the knocking finally stopped. She tried to catch her breath and shake off her fear. She then got up from the door and ran to the basement level of the home. It was an old house, so the kitchen and rec room were down there, along with the only phone in the house. She made it to the phone and began to dial 911. All of a sudden, she heard a shatter from the next room. She looked over to see the crazed neighbor attempting to crawl through the kitchen window. She was ripping down the curtain as his upper body got through, and my mom screamed what was happening to the police on the phone. All of a sudden, he was bleeding from the abdomen where the window glass had cut him as his lower half couldn't squeeze through. Then my mom began hearing my grandma's screams. "What the heck are you doing?" The guy yelled in pain and squirmed out the window as she hit him from behind with some type of tool that was lying in her garden on the side of the house where the entrance to the window was. He managed to get out the window and bolted to his house. The police came. Grandma called my grandfather and he arrived as well after shutting down the business as soon as she told him. They arrested him for breaking and entering and something else. I believe that was unrelated, like a probation violation, I assume. On the day of his court date, he told them the white flag of surrender story. But this was the final nut on his crazy cake, as they put him in a mental institution that day. He may have gotten out, but went back because my mother said he later died in an institution. Outside the courthouse, the crazy Appalachian redneck family of the creep tried to blame my 8-year-old mother, and the man's father called my mother a harlot. Needless to say, my army-trained grandpa beat the guy's ass on the courthouse steps, as the local cops turned a blind eye. That story has always stuck with me. My mom had to receive therapy for it, so it haunts her a lot as well to this day. We always can't help but wonder though, what would he have done to her if my grandma hadn't come at that moment? So to you, creepy cat killer who traumatized my mom, let's not meet. This happened a few years ago when I was 13. I was somewhat popular in school at the time, and I had around 4 very, very close friends. Rose, Lynn, Noah, and Zach were the main ones. We went on many adventures around that time, camping, road trips, and the beach. Noah's family was pretty wealthy, and all of our families were pretty lenient with rules. One day, the summer before 8th grade, we went on a camping trip with Lynn's older sister, Margot, and Zach's older brother, Todd. So there were 7 of us. Lynn, Zach, and I were 13, Noah and Rose were 14, and Margot and Todd were both 17. We decided to go camping in a nearby forest, around 20 miles from Noah's house. It was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Noah's house and his neighborhood were the closest homes, and there were no signals for phones or any electronics. We get to the spot easily and without problems, and we make camp. The girls are in one tent, the boys in another. Maybe it was a bad idea to have 17s, ages 13 to 17 with no phones in the woods, but our parents were lenient, like I said, and confident that we would be fine since the woods were not known for anything bad or dangerous. So we set up the tents, go swimming in a nearby lake, and come back and make dinner over a fire, which was about 20 feet away from the tents, which were about 4 feet away from each other, by the way. We have s'mores and do all of those stupid camping things before Lynn and Margot announced that they are going to sleep. That left Todd, Rose, Zach, Noah, and me as we joked around, told some scary stories, and just overall had a good time. Then Margot walks up annoyed and tells us that whoever it is messing with the side of the tent should stop. Keep in mind nobody left the group and tents were far enough away to not bother anyone in the tents. She explained that somebody keeps on touching the side of the tent, running something on it, and we dismiss her. Todd states that it is probably a tree branch, and Rose and I decide to go to sleep as well. So we head back to the tent. Lynn is asleep and we settle in, me closest to the opening, Margot next to Lynn, who was at the opposite side of the tent, and Rose in between Margot and me. I managed to fall asleep easily within 5 minutes until I woke up suddenly for what seemed like no reason. I checked my phone. I still brought it in a portable charger just to take pictures, and it was literally the middle of the night at 2:15. I looked around, my eyes getting used to the darkness, trying to figure out why I woke up. A tapping sound on the tent was what I first noticed, and a soft giggling. It sounded somewhat deep like a male voice, but I couldn't be sure. After what felt like an hour but was probably a minute, the tapping and giggling stopped. I was convinced it was my imagination, or maybe one of the boys trying to prank us, or even a tree branch, like Todd suggested earlier. Telling myself it was a tree branch and a lack of sleep, I fell back asleep until Rose woke me up around dawn. Everybody was awake and we decided to hike a little bit. We decided to go into 2 groups because we planned on spending the night again and we didn't want anybody messing with our stuff. Even though these woods weren't popular with camping, we didn't want to risk it. Margot, Lynn, Rose, and I left to go hiking for a couple of hours while the boys opted to stay behind and fish, swim, and cook food. We hiked for about 2 hours and we came back to the boys not at the campsite. Annoyed, Margot went down to the lake with Lynn to find them. Rose and I made our way back to the tents, and I'll be honest and say I screamed and almost wet my pants. The tents were slashed. I inspected it closer after regaining composure because I was usually the more collected one of the 2 of us. It seemed to be made with a small knife as the cuts were small. Our tents were made of a material that was pretty hard to cut into, and it seemed like the person had a pocket knife, I guessed. The boys, Margot and Lynn, came running to our screams and were obviously startled. We decided to pack up and head home early, because for 1, the tents were ripped, too much to use again comfortably, and 2, Rose, Lynn, and I were very creeped out. Even more so when Todd announced that his tires were slashed. We were all freaking out, obviously. There was no cell service. Todd's tires were slashed, and there was no way any of us wanted to stay any longer. Luckily, Todd reported that Margot's tires looked fine, and Margot stated that she would take Noah and Lynn, drop them off to call 911 and their parents, and come back for us. She drove a car, and there wasn't enough room for more than 3 people as the back was filled up with the camping stuff. Zach, Todd, Rose, and I were left at the campgrounds, and we decided to begin a hike back towards the main road, so Margot wouldn't have to drive so far. Also, Rose and I refused to stay anywhere near the camp area. We began hiking. My phone died. The last time I looked at it, it was 1 in the afternoon. Zach and Rose both had working phones and constantly updated us on how far we had been walking. I began to hear branches snapping from behind us, closer to the trees than we walked, and I got more and more paranoid as time went on. I told Todd, and he seemed to get more wary of our surroundings, constantly looking over his shoulder. We had been walking for about 30 minutes. Margot was probably at Noah's house or almost there when Todd screamed, "Run." Naturally, I looked behind my shoulder before I began running. 3 hooded figures were running towards us. 2 had knives, and they all looked around 6'3" or taller. Todd was 6'1", but I doubted he could defend all of us against them. Even though it was broad daylight, I couldn't make out any facial features. They all appeared to be over or around 200 pounds. The shortest one was probably 6'2", but they all wore hoods and masks on, like ski masks. I know it sounds totally fake, and I really don't care if you believe me, but I was scared shitless that day. We began running, and the 3 guys finally gave up or decided we weren't worth terrorizing because we lost them. We made it to the main road where we waited, walking quickly, constantly looking over our shoulders in fear until Margot arrived. We told the police everything, and they searched the woods nearby. They never found any evidence we had even been there or the guys had been there, or that anything happened besides pictures of the lake around the area and the shredded tents. I don't know what would have happened if they caught us. I'm fairly tall. I was around 5'10" during this time and only 125 pounds. Rose was around 5'1" and 100 pounds, and Zach was barely 5'9" at the time. He probably outweighed me by 10 pounds maximum. I am so thankful that I told Todd about them. I have no doubt that they would have been able to catch us if he hadn't been looking over his shoulder constantly, and I am so thankful that we all got physical activity regularly, were fast enough to outrun them, and that they gave up. So, whoever you guys were, let's not meet. I'm a petite woman, and when I was 24, I worked at a pharmacy and convenience store for about a year as a cashier. I had many weird encounters because people were sometimes behind in their medication doses when they came in to pick them up, mostly harmless. The shifts were usually just one cashier and a supervisor, with the supervisor in the back of the store and the cashier alone up front. This happened close to Halloween at about 9 a.m. on a sunny, innocent day. I was just chilling at the cash register, waiting for customers when a man came in and stood in the aisle across from the register and just stared at me for a good 5 minutes. I didn't realize that's actually what he was doing until he made eye contact and he didn't look away. He was huge and reminded me of Tyler Labine's character in Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, just not the least bit charming. I immediately called my supervisor up front over the loudspeaker, and the guy walked down the aisle towards the pharmacy. When my supervisor appeared, I'm not being mean, but she was morbidly obese and had bad knees, so she was very slow. I told her what happened. She downplayed it, didn't look for him, and said to just call her if he did anything. Comforting. When she was gone, the man made a loop around the store and came right to my register with a bag of Halloween candy and nothing else. I tried ringing him up quickly, but he started asking me ridiculous questions about our savings card program and insisting he sign up. I slid him a pamphlet to fill out his information because I did not want to speak to him more than I had to. He just stood there holding the pen and staring at me, then suddenly asked if I knew how trick-or-treating originated. I didn't have the time to answer him before he started describing how back in the day, that men ruled the country, and that they would go house to house every year on Halloween and demand the daughters of every age to be handed over so they could assault them. That was trick-or-treating in his mind. As soon as I heard that word, I said, "Get away from me," and walked to the other register and called my supervisor loudly over the speaker because he was blocking my way to the bag. He knew she was out of shape and slow, and he didn't flinch as he followed me to the next register and started talking about how all women are bitches and are meant to serve men sexually. He noted my wedding ring and said that my husband could also rent me out for sex because it was his right and so on. I was shaking and considering jumping the side of the register to put some distance between us so I could run. Luckily, the male pharmacist heard the panic in my voice and rushed to the front of the store. He saw the man and shouted, "Jake, get the heck out of here." The man, Jake, just stared at him as he calmly walked out, and it was so scary and stupid at the same time. It turns out that Jake had been a regular customer until he stopped picking up his medication. Instead, he would just come in and harass female workers, and he'd been on a police enforced ban for over a year. The person who helped me, Mr. Pharmacist, called the police and the store manager to bitch her out for still scheduling girls alone after everything Jake did in the past, such as ripping a toilet seat off one of our toilets and threatening to beat a girl with it who used to work there. I quickly transferred to a different location because I just could not get over it, and the manager kept scheduling us alone. The police only watched the store for a week. Jake, just now. To preface this, I'm a 35-year-old woman and I worked at 3 different answering services from ages 16 through my mid-20s. I hope this is okay here. It involved me just over 20 years ago. The Titty Man, bondsmen, and sheriff's deputies. Forgive the formatting, I'm on mobile. I got my first job at an answering service when I was 16 and I loved it. We answered for about 200 businesses and there was quite a mix. Same old every day, but different too. I was the baby of the office and so was usually not alone, and my coworkers protected me from the usual office debauchery, like drugs, sex, and booze, but somehow forgot to mention the Titty Man. So this came as a bit of a shock that he did what he did. I'd been working there for a few weeks and was alone on a Sunday night answering calls here and there and being bored. The line for a visiting nurse company, home healthcare, hospice, and rehab lights up. I answer to be greeted with a collect call from the local county jail. I accept the call, thinking that somebody might have an elderly parent that they can't reach and need a wellness check or to schedule extra visits because they got locked up. Nope, I'm greeted with, "How big are your tits?" I promptly hung up. He called back several times and I have to accept the call in case it really is for the reasons listed above. I contact the on-call nurse and she tells me what I just told you about and how he does this from time to time. I then proceed to be harassed for about half an hour when I get a brilliant idea. Of course, the Titty Man calls back and I accept the call. I tell him I have to put him on hold sometimes so I can answer the phone, but I'll talk to him. He likes this and he starts asking questions. Dirty ones, and I answer a few, then put him on hold. Here's where law enforcement comes into play. I called the bondsman we also answered for and explained my situation. He grabbed his other phone and called his buddy inside the jail, relaying the situation. He's having trouble doing this because he's also listening to me talk dirty to this creep. I was very creative for Titty Man, and he ate it up. My bondsman was laughing so hard he was in tears. Since the Titty Man was calling from inside the overcrowded jail, they couldn't pinpoint him just by being on the phone. Deputies began shutting down banks of phones one at a time. When the call cut off mid-pervy spew, the officers checked who was on that bank. Lo and behold, there was Titty Man. He was in jail because he, surprise, was making obscene and harassing phone calls. Who would have thought? Deputies took him into custody with new charges and he got another 18 months or so tacked onto his existing sentence. The idiot was fairly short of the door too. Means he was close to release without supervision. My story doesn't end here, however. Several years later, I was working at another answering service and he called. Same company and everything. My old service had closed. I informed the on-call nurse, same one as before too, and they ended up pressing charges on him again. I encountered this creep and his creepy yet hilarious antics at all 3 services for the same company and different ones as well. It's been 20 years since I first encountered the Titty Man and I no longer do answering service work, but I have a few friends that still do and the creep is still at it. I hope you get a kick out of my story. Edit. I forgot to mention that he did this on a recorded line and I told him I was 16 during the conversation. I wonder what the judge thought about that.